Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku had met Itsuka at the sports festival. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The day was bright, the wind was howling and the people were cheering loudly. It was that time of the year again. The great sports festival was about to begin, and everyone was looking forward to it. Many students from the prestigious academy known as UA were currently in the waiting room to engage in the first event. The event was held annually so that the young heroes in training could be noticed by the pro heroes, who might want to hire them or take them under their wing once the event was over. The magnitude of the event was amplified and more people tuned in to watch the event on TV due to an incident at UA some time ago. Apparently, some group of lowlives who called themselves the League of Villains had managed to bypass security and attack the students of Class 1 to attract All Might and kill him. Obviously, it didn't work for them. All Might was the #1 hero and the symbol of peace for a reason. Still, the people of Japan were paying close attention to the sports festival because they knew that these would be the next generation of heroes, the ones who would save them in the future. Those who would carry the weight of the world on their backs. Those who would have to face off against groups of criminals like the League of Villains on a daily basis. Many students knew this too, so it was only natural of them to train harder than ever before to go as far as possible in this event. One such student was Itsuka Kendo from Class 1B. She was an honest fighter, who was seen by the rest of her class as their big sister. After the incident at the USJ, she had a ton of questions roaming around her head. Who were the people that dared attack students of all people? What did they expect to accomplish by killing All Might? How the hell did the students from the sister class manage to defeat actual villains with murderous intentions? Either way, Itsuka knew that she would have to train harder than ever before if incidents like that would repeat in the future, not only for herself, but to protect the rest of her classmates. She was the class representative, after all. What kind of class rep would let her fellow classmates be hurt on her watch? Itsuka was currently stretching on a corner of the waiting room. She had absolutely no idea of what the challenges of the upcoming sports festival would be, but she knew she would have to be noticed by the top pro heroes if she wanted to go far. Failing was not an option, it was as simple as that. Itsuka's train of thoughts was interrupted when someone bumped into her by accident. Itsuka rubbed her shoulder and looked beside her with a somewhat annoyed expression to see who it was. She was met with the sight of a green-haired boy with freckles, who, upon noticing that he had bumped into her, immediately turned into a blushing and stuttering mess. Sorry, I was just on my way to the entrance. Itsuka took in every detail about him. The boy looked familiar to her for some reason. He seemed pretty adorable for a hero in training. Perhaps he was a lost child in the body of a teen or something. Either way, his reaction got a giggle out of Itsuka, who patted his shoulder with a reassuring smile. Hey, don't sweat it. We're all pretty nervous here. Don't get worked up. Itsuka's smile was warm and calming, which helped the boy calm down. The boy rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and smiled while looking down. Why, yeah, sorry. I'm just a little nervous and excited about this. The sports festival is broadcasted throughout the country and is watched by a lot of people. I don't want to fail those who are counting on me. Itsuka was intrigued by this boy. He seemed like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders or something like that if he was speaking so seriously and nervously. Well, in any case, all we can do is give it our best shot, right? Itsuka smiled warmly at the boy, who looked up at her with a smile of his own. Why, yeah, we'll do our best. Say, you look kinda familiar. Have we met before? Itsuka squints her eyes at the boy, who blushes again and steps back nervously in response. And not that I think of why. Have you seen me before? The boy's reactions were both funny and interesting to Itsuka. The poor thing must have never talked to girls before if he was this nervous to be talking to her like this. I don't know, I guess it's just a hunch. Itsuka chuckles with a shrug before extending her hand to the boy. My name is Itsuka Kendo, class representative of Class 1B and future pro hero, Battle Fist. What's your name? The boy shakes her hand nervously. My name is Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A. This surprises Itsuka. Was this boy really in Class 1A? The same class that got attacked by the League of Villains? If so, then how on earth was he still alive? The poor thing looked like he was about to faint just from talking to her. How the heck did he manage to survive an actual villain attack? Itsuka decides to scan the boy a bit more. Really? Wow, I heard about the incident on the USJ some time ago. It must have been frightening to be in such a situation. Izuku looks away and his expression darkens for a moment. Yeah, you could say that. Luckily, All Might was there in time to save us. Itsuka wasn't convinced. Izuku looked like he was hiding something important from her. So is that really all that happened? You got saved by All Might because he was there in time. Nothing else happened. Izuku looks away again. Yes, he's the greatest hero for a reason. I've always looked up to him. We would have been toast if it wasn't for him. Itsuka decides to stop pushing Izuku. She didn't know what happened that day, but she knew that it must have been something bad if Izuku didn't want to talk about it. Itsuka puts on a smile and pats his shoulder reassuringly. Well, in any case, I'm glad you're all safe. We're not trained to face off against real villains yet, so I'm really happy that you managed to save yourselves and handle the situation just fine. Izuku's nervous demeanor returns as Itsuka touches him, and he starts to stutter again. It was nothing special. Really? All Might did all the heavy lifting, haha. Itsuka giggles before the sound of a siren echoing through the waiting room cuts their conversation short. The voice of Present Mike booms through the room. Good morning, loyal listeners. Are you ready for the sports festival? The crowd could be heard roaring in excitement outside. Radical, today will be a day we'll never forget. I hope you're ready to take out your cameras and recording systems to tell your grandchildren about this, because we are about to stay ahead. Itsuka and Izuku smirk and look at each other with determined expressions. Looks like the first event is about to start. It was nice meeting you, Midoriya. Good luck. Itsuka waves at Izuku as she walks towards the door. Why yeah, nice to meet you too, Kendo. I'll see you on the finals. Izuku walks towards the door as well, determined to win the sports festival, although a tiny voice in his head couldn't be happier. Holy All Might, I talked to another girl. Izuku giggled to himself as the rest of the students approached the giant door separating them from the arena. Izuku looked to the side and saw his fellow classmates preparing themselves as well. The expressions of everyone were mixed. On the one hand, Ochako Uraraka smiled and waved at Izuku once she noticed him looking at her direction, while Tenya Ida, Shoto Todoroki, and especially Katsuki Bakugo were eyeing him down with some competitive disdain. It was clear that everyone was determined to win, and that they were willing to step on each other to do that. Izuku looks away at the sight of Bakugo. He knew that Bakugo hated his guts for both enrolling into UA like he clearly told him not to do, and for beating him at the simulation joint exercise. Bakugo, on the other hand, was not really thinking about Izuku, but rather about his chance to prove himself better than everyone at this event. After all, there was no one as great as he was, right? On the other side, Shoto Todoroki and Tenya Ida looked at Midoriya with some disdain before looking back at the entrance door. They both saw Midoriya as a strange acquaintance, but also as a rival they had to surpass. The siren stops echoing through the room as Present Mike starts to explain the first event. Our first event is one that was made possible with the help of our beloved comrade Cementos. Everyone, let's give it up for CEMENTOSSSSSSS. Present Mike gestures towards Cementos, who is just sitting at the judge's table with a serious expression, waving at the audience. With his serious expression, no one would have guessed that he was smiling in secret. Pay attention, dear listeners. The first event is called the Great Maze. The entrance door to the waiting room opens up to reveal a huge concrete maze in the arena. The students looked up in awe at the giant walls of the maze. They were so big that climbing them would be a hassle, and there were spikes on top of them to prevent anyone from actually climbing up as a tactic. The top of the labyrinthic structure wasn't completely sealed off, but the window was too small for anyone to squeeze through. Each participant will race each other to the end of this maze, and are allowed to use their quirks as freely as they want. Although, be careful not to climb to the top of the walls, because that will guarantee a one-way ticket to the expulsion room. Some students groaned at that. Shoto Todoroki sighs in acceptance while Bakugo groans in annoyance. Be careful, lovely participants. You never know what you might encounter in this maze. You could encounter both good and bad things to stop you or help you out in this challenge. You're free to detriment each other if you want, but you're not allowed to incapacitate each other. We want a fair and fun event, isn't that right, everyone? The audience cheers harder at that. Itsuka and Izuku start thinking of strategies to use in this event. Itsuka groaned internally at her chances. Her quirk might be good in battle, but in a challenge like this, it could be next to useless if the circumstances are not correct. Izuku felt the same, although he felt even more powerless. He still hadn't controlled the power of One for All, and he knew it could be dangerous to use it in the very first event. What if he used it and he was incapacitated to participate in the rest of the sports festival? Plus, what could he even use One for All for in a challenge like this? Shota Aizawa, Class 1A's homeroom teacher, who was sitting in the commentator's booth with Present Mike, sighed in annoyance at the event. This challenge is idiotic and illogical. Some students are bound to have an advantage over others because of their quirks. Present Mike simply laughed at Aizawa. Isn't that more exciting, Eraser? We'll witness our students go beyond their limits and think of strategies to beat the challenge presented to them to the best of their capabilities. Isn't that what UA stands for, dude? Aizawa shakes his head. That still doesn't mean I have to like it. Oh, get over yourself, you big mummy. Present Mike playfully slaps Aizawa's arm as softly as he can, since he knows Aizawa is still recovering from his wounds from the USJ incident. Oh, oops, sorry, Eraser. Some students smirk while others sweat. Todoroki, Bakugo and even Uraraka step forward with confidence, since they know their quirks will give them an advantage on this challenge. Izuku and Itsuka let out a little breath of nervousness before putting on a brave and determined expression. Present Mike grabs the microphone and announces the beginning of the event as a gun is fired below. Ready, begin. As soon as the gun was fired and Present Mike gave the order, every student rushed off to beat the maze challenge on their own. A couple of students fell on their tracks while others took advantage from the start. Itsuka and Izuku ran at full speed alongside the rest of the participants, eager to win the challenge. Bakugo, Todoroki, and Ida wasted no time before activating their quirks. Todoroki used his right side to create an ice path to slide on and created spikes on the trail behind him to prevent others from using it. Ida activated his engines and ran at full speed towards the maze. Bakugo smirked before blasting off into the labyrinth using his hands as propellers. Izuku watched this from behind, and he knew that he was falling behind quickly. Nevertheless, the first split path was directly in front of the group, with 3 paths, one going forward, one to the left, and one to the right. Bakugo and Todoroki went for the right path. Ida went for the middle path, and Izuku, Itsuka, and Uraraka went for the left path. Present Mike and the audience seemed to be enjoying the start of the challenge, watching everything on the screens of the arena via cameras planted inside the maze. WOOWZA, a racer, they're getting aggressive from the start. This might be the race of a lifetime. Bakugo and Todoroki kept sprinting down the path they chose with the rest of the students who picked the same path starting to fall behind. Upon noticing how close they were, Todoroki stomped the ground, sending an ice barrage towards Bakugo, who dodged with ease. Is that all you got, extra? Bakugo smiled before aiming his hands at Todoroki, ready to blast him off. Todoroki reacted by creating an ice wall between each other just in time before Bakugo detonated the sweat on his hands. Todoroki was pushed off his ice slide as the explosion went off. How annoying. Todoroki didn't show much emotion, but he seemed to be getting annoyed at Bakugo's attitude. See you on the finish line, half and half. Bakugo blasted off ahead again while Todoroki recovered. Todoroki simply recreated his previous tactic, making sure to seal off the path behind him to block the incoming students. The students who were blocked off by Todoroki's ice banged on the ice wall, glaring at Todoroki. Don't take it personal. Only the best of us are fit to win this. Todoroki gave one last condescending look to the students before sliding off. Those guys must be very sure of themselves. They might want to reconsider not taking us seriously. A girl with black hair and weird-looking earlobes approached the ice wall with a smile. Correct. We are not falling behind. Another girl with long, black hair arranged in a ponytail said while coming closer to the wall. Are you ready? Said the girl known as Kyoka Gyro, placing her earphone jacks in the ice wall and starting to make it vibrate. I am. Everyone, step back, said Momoye Arazu before creating a harpoon with her quirk. Once the ice wall was starting to crack, Momo gave the harpoon to her classmate Rikido Sato, who launched it to the center of the ice wall with all his strength, shattering it completely and making way for everyone to go through. The audience audibly gasped at that, and Present Mike screeched in amusement. Hey, those are your students, aren't they, Eraser? How the heck did you teach them those tricks in such a short period of time? Aizawa simply sighed and looked down at the maze through his bandages. That has nothing to do with me. They've been exposed to the real world before, so they now know how to think fast on their feet. I didn't teach them a single thing they're showcasing now. They are just doing the best they can with their talents. Present Mike laughs and slaps Aizawa's head lightly. You heard it here, everyone. Eraserhead is a terrible teacher. What? Looky here. Looks like things are heating up down there. Bakugo and Todoroki paid no attention whatsoever to the praise Present Mike was giving them, as they were too focused on their own competition to one-up each other. Slowpoke. Bakugo scoffed and launched some drops of sweat towards Todoroki, which he detonated once they were in his range. Are you always this loud and annoying? Todoroki kept chasing after Bakugo, sliding on the quickly made ice slide and covering himself with rapid chunks of thick ice. Cry all you want, ice hot. I'm still gonna win this. The couple eventually bumped into something hard. Once they took a second glance at it, they realized that it was a robot equipped with missile launchers. Interesting. This must be one of the unpleasant surprises we were warned about, said Todoroki, looking at the medium-sized robot with a thoughtful gaze. Don't tell me stuff I already know, extra. I can take care of this myself, said Bakugo, snarling before jumping at the robot with a murderous smirk and explosions forming on his hands. Suit yourself, then. Todoroki shrugged Bakugo off and continued sliding down the labyrinth. Bakugo destroyed the robot before it could even fire a single missile, but he was enraged when the half-and-half user was nowhere to be found. Oi, get back here, moron, growled Bakugo before chasing after his rival. Oh, looks like our lovely contestant didn't pick up what we left off for him. What a shame. Looks like your students might need to learn to scan the environment some more, Eraser, said Present Mike, approaching Aizawa with a smile. My ear is ruptured and my skin feels like it might fall off. Can you stop it? Oh, sorry, Eraser. Tenya Ida didn't hear what the commentators were saying, nor did he care. He was too busy figuring out how to get out of this maze before anyone else did. Ada had gained a lot of advantage over everyone else due to his speed, but he knew that it wasn't enough. His engines could stall and he could lose advantage any moment. He had considered running up the walls, but he wasn't sure if he could reach the speed necessary to do so. Plus, he didn't want to be expelled from the event. Darn, this maze is constructed in such a way that dead ends don't feel like dead ends. Whoever designed it must be a mastermind, said Ida under his breath as he kept running through the maze at high speeds. Then, he noticed a hole in the ground. He was thinking about ignoring it, but curiosity got the best of him. Ada stopped running to both inspect the hole and to keep his engines from overheating. What a strange structure was this left behind on purpose. Ada noticed that the hole was big enough for a student to fit inside. And well, this maze was designed by professionals. I doubt they'd do something like this without reason. Ada entered the hole, and he noticed that the hole was actually an entrance to an underground tunnel. Fascinating, said Ada to himself. Then, he activated his quirk to run through the tunnel as fast as he could. Wow, looks like one of your students found one of our underground tunnels, Eraser. Too bad that's the one that leads to the beginning of the maze, said Present Mike, giggling to himself with the audience following. Aizawa sighs again and shakes his head. Itsuka didn't know what Present Mike was going on about, but it seemed like he had been giving praises to Class 1 previously. Seriously, what made Class 1 so special? Why were they the focus of everyone? Was she missing something? Either way, Itsuka knew that she couldn't let her thoughts and emotions get to her in a moment like this. Still, it was hard to do so when she had the boy she had met before the event started right behind her. Izuku was right behind Itsuka, running as fast as his legs could carry him. Not too far behind him, Ochako Uraraka was also giving it her best attempt, running at full speed towards the end of the maze. Izuku looked behind him and noticed that not too many students were behind them. Most of them probably had gone behind Bakugo or Ida, he thought. However, the small group was stopped when a robot as tall as the walls of the maze came into view. What the heck is that? Said Itsuka aloud in alarm. Must be one of the dangers Present Mike told us about, said Izuku, coming to a stop. Wow, he's very tall, said Uraraka, who stopped next to Izuku. The robot looked at the small group of students before aiming one of his 6 arms at them, firing a grappling hook at them. Duck, shouted Izuku, jumping back. The group did just that before the hook hit the ground next to them. The robot proceeded to rip the floor from beneath them and crushing it against the walls. Deku-kun, I have an idea. You remember how my quirk works, right? We can use it to get rid of him, said Uraraka, coming close to Izuku. That might work. Quick, let's do it, Uraraka, said Izuku, urging Uraraka to hurry up as the robot prepared to launch missiles at them with 2 of his arms. Uraraka reacted by touching Izuku's chest and making him float. Great, thanks, Uraraka. Now give me a boost, said Izuku. Uraraka grabbed Izuku and spun him around once before throwing him at the robot with all her strength. Izuku landed on the robot's face, making him misfire the missiles. Itsuka saw all of this from the sidelines. She was amazed at how well Izuku and Uraraka cooperated. It was a last-minute plan, and yet it was executed so perfectly, so quickly, so efficiently it was almost as if these two had known and worked with each other for a long time. Once Izuku had a hold on the robot, he clawed around until he got to the back of his head. Once there, Izuku took notice of a lid that was loose on the robot's surface, and he took it off, revealing a battery of some sort. Jackpot, said Izuku, smiling before grabbing the battery and ripping out of the robot's head. The robot was turned off, and it fell to the floor with a large thud. Once the threat was neutralized, Izuku came down from the robot sweating while Itsuka and Uraraka came to him. That was amazing, Deku-kun, said Uraraka cheerfully before hugging him. Izuku turned into a blushing mess again. I at W was nothing, Uraraka. You did half of the work, said Izuku, trying to get away from Uraraka. Wow, that was some display of cooperativeness, you two. Do you know each other from middle school or something? Said Itsuka, still in amazement from the display of teamwork Izuku and Uraraka showed off. Huh, oh no. We met at the entrance exam and we became friends. Nothing more, said Uraraka, who blushed and let go of Izuku. Itsuka wasn't convinced by this. Really, you don't know each other from before. It seemed like you two knew each other since diapers. Izuku blushed and looked away in embarrassment. And no, it's not like that. We swear. Just as Itsuka was about to question them again, the rest of the students were starting to catch up to them. Itsuka smirked before shoving Uraraka and Izuku aside. Whatever. We still have a maze to beat, you two. Come on. Itsuka giggled as she ran away. Izuku and Uraraka's blushing stopped all of a sudden when the thrill of the challenge returned to their bodies. Right, This is a competence. We just have to. Izuku's sentence was cut short when he felt Uraraka touching him again, using her quirk on him. Huh, Uraraka. Sorry, Deku-kun. We gotta do our best, said Uraraka before pushing Izuku, making him float back. Uraraka giggled before running away with the rest of the students, leaving behind a very distressed Izuku. Once Uraraka and the rest of the students were far away, Izuku came down to the ground, probably due to Uraraka deactivating her quirk to use it for something else. Izuku groaned and kicked a nearby rock, feeling disappointed after being left behind so easily. Damn it, I can't believe I forgot this is a free-for-all, said Izuku, mumbling under his breath. Before he could keep feeling sorry for himself, he took a glance at the remains of the robot, and he noticed something strange in the robot's head, right in the spot where its battery used to lay. Huh, what's this? Said Izuku, taking a look at the robot and going towards its head. He couldn't believe it. The backpack, and it came with an underground map and a noise detector. This must be what President Mike told us would help us win this event, said Izuku happily, putting on the noise detector on his ear and grasping the underground map with his left hand. Yeah, looks like one of our lovely contestants has finally found one of our helpful kids. He surely deserves it after beating that robot and being ditched by his friends, don't you think, Eraser? Said President Mike, elbowing Aizawa lightly. How many times do I have to tell you it hurts like a million suns when you touch me? Oops, sorry, Eraser. I keep forgetting. In the other side of the maze, Bakugo and Todoroki were sick to death of each other. Their struggle to one-up each other led to nothing but tiredness and dead ends, along with multiple scrapped robots who were no more than distractions that fueled their temper. God fucking damn it, extra. Just let me win. I'm clearly the superior one here, said Bakugo, still using his quirk to propel himself, but being less fast due to his exhaustion getting to him. No way. I'm not going to give up just because you say so. You have no authority over me, said Todoroki, who was still sliding through the maze but was doing so slower than at the beginning. This is goddamn pointless, you damn half bastard, said Bakugo, now coming down to the ground. Ugh, you might be right, Bakugo. This is getting us nowhere, said Todoroki, who stopped sliding on the ground due to the overuse of his quirk. Bakugo thought for a moment before looking at Todoroki begrudgingly. Hey, how about we stop this crap for some minutes until we find the way out of this thing? I'm tired of throwing hands for nothing. Todoroki would be surprised under any other circumstances, but his exhaustion made him nod almost instantly. I agree, even if we don't like each other, working together might be our best option right now. Bakugo stepped close to Todoroki before glaring at him. I'm only doing this to prove I'm the best. Got that? Once we find the way out, it's every man for themselves, half and half. Todoroki squinted his eyes at Bakugo. I agree. Bakugo steps back and softens his glare a little bit. Good. At least that nerd isn't here to mess everything up. Then, both of them looked to the side and saw Izuku coming out from a hole in the floor, holding some sort of map and wearing an earpiece of some sort. Bakugo's strength seemed to return for an instant, as he dashed over to Izuku and grabbed him by the neck. You. Damn it, Deku. How are you here? Said Bakugo, angry at how Izuku had managed to catch up to them so fast. I must say, I am also intrigued, Midoriya. You arrived to a point that took Bakugo and me a long time to travel, and you don't seem nearly as tired as us, said Todoroki, crossing his arms. Well, I can explain, guys. I found this map and began Izuku, but was interrupted when Bakugo took the map out of his hands. What is this? Huh? Are you cheating? Bakugo scanned the map briefly before burning it with his quirk. Huh, hey, that was uncalled for, said Izuku as the ashes of the map dropped to the ground. Listen, Deku, there can only be one winner here, and that's gonna be me, got that? You better stay here or I'll come for you, said Bakugo before letting go of Izuku and turning away. In any other situation he would have had some fun threatening Izuku, but he was simply too tired out from blasting through the maze to do it. Midoriya, while I don't share Bakugo's sentiments, I do see you as a rival I'll surpass in the end, said Todoroki before walking away too, leaving behind Izuku. Ugh, who do they think they are? They can't just tell people that they're better than everyone, thought Izuku as he tried to think of a new plan to win the maze challenge. Then it suddenly hit him he still had one for all in the earpiece. What to do with them? Izuku activated the earpiece to hear the sounds around him amplified. There were sounds of all kind around him. Sounds of robots being destroyed, sounds of classmates yelling curses at each other, sounds of quirks being activated. But a particular sound caught Izuku's attention. It was the sound of the crowd cheering, and it came from the wall behind him. Could it be? Is this the exit? Muttered Izuku as he touched the wall behind him. It seemed like the sound of the crowd cheering was stronger on this side than in any other place. But how to get there? Well, President Mike did say everyone could use their quirks as much as they wanted. Plus he said nothing about the walls of the maze. Izuku got an idea. A terrible, risky, last-minute idea. If it worked, he could win the first place in this event. If it didn't, he could fail miserably. Was it worth it to go for one last lucky push? Screw it, said Izuku, charging up the power of one for all and aiming his pinky finger at the wall. DLAWARESMASH, shouted Izuku as he released his finger. The wall was reduced to debris and was sent backwards, revealing a straight path to the finish line. WOOOW. What was that? Looks like one of our contestants is on the final sprint to the finish line. Seriously, a racer. What the heck are you teaching your students? Shouted Present Mike, to which Aizawa simply groaned. The audience roared in disbelief. I got this, said Izuku, clutching his now broken finger and making one final dash towards the end of the challenge, swaying slightly from side to side due to his body being in a lot of pain. Once Izuku was halfway there, Bakugo and Todoroki came from around the corner, and their jaws hit the floor once they saw Izuku limping his way to the finish line. Deku Deku, roared Bakugo as he found some last bits of strength and propelled himself towards Izuku and the end of the challenge. That cunning, sly little, growled Todoroki as he also found some bits of strength and created another ice slide towards the finish line. OOOH, this is getting exciting. We got 3 contestants on the last sprint to the end of our first challenge. Will it be a tie? A photo finish? Screamed Present Mike from the commentator's booth. Damn it, muttered Izuku as he looked behind him. Bakugo and Todoroki were gaining ground behind him, and they looked angry. Izuku tried to ignore them and focus on the finish line. But it was hard to do so due to his broken finger. You're not getting away with this, damn nerd, shouted Bakugo from behind Izuku. Bakugo and Todoroki had surpassed Izuku. That was it. It was all over. Or at least, that's what they thought. Just as Bakugo and Todoroki were about to cross the finish line, a barrage of speakers tied to flashing grenades appeared in front of them. A sneak attack, said Todoroki, stopping in his tracks. What the foo, said Bakugo, his sentence being cut short when the grenades detonated and the speakers went off, blinding and stunning him alongside Todoroki. Izuku looked behind him to see where the grenades had come from, and he noticed Momo Yaoyorozu with her hand outstretched and a cannon in front of her. Momo smiled. That's for belittling us, you brutes. Gyro, who was dashing to the finish line alongside Momo, smiled at Izuku. Win this, Greenie. You deserve it. Izuku smiled and nodded at Gyro before making one final sprint to the finish line, crossing it with Bakugo and Todoroki behind him. The crowd erupted in cheers when Izuku crossed the line. His mother, who was watching the event at home, was fully crying waterfalls. My baby, why. I see you, K-U-U-U-U-U. All Might, who was watching from the stands, clapped and looked at Izuku with an admiration and proud look. Good job, kid. You showed them who you are. Present Mike was foaming out of his mouth. H-O-O-R-E-Y. And here I thought this would be boring. Eraser, I can't handle so much tension and emotion. Aizawa didn't like that Izuku had to break his finger, but he had a newfound sense of respect for the kid, since he managed to secure a win after all. Tenya Ada, who was only just coming out of the maze, looked on with amazement and some slight envy. Midoriya, that man must be an evil genius in disguise, said Ida to himself. Bakugo was fuming. Not only did he lose, but he lost to the useless bug he thought could squish whenever he felt like it. I'll get that bastard in the next events, thought Bakugo to himself before walking off. Todoroki was simply speechless. How did he allow himself to be beaten by Midoriya of all people? His quirk is useless compared to his own. His stamina couldn't be better than his own. He probably didn't have as much training as he did. How did Midoriya win? And last but not least, the most surprised people were none other than Uraraka and Kendo. Uraraka was ecstatic for Izuku, although she knew she couldn't express it to him directly, since she was the one that had slowed him down in the first place. The only thing Uraraka could do for now was smile fondly at Izuku from the distance. On the other hand, Itsuka couldn't be more surprised. This boy, this adorable, shy, innocent boy, he had somehow managed to win. By the looks of it, he had broken a finger to win the maze challenge, but he won nonetheless. How? Was the only thing Itsuka could think of. This Izuku Midoriya boy was not only a member of the class that got attacked by actual murderous villains, but also had managed to win with a broken finger. Was she just missing something? There was no way someone as plain, boring and confusing as him could have been able to do these amazing feats. Itsuka knew she had to know more about him. Whatever it was about him or class 1 of that made them special, it sure was working. I'll talk to him later, thought Itsuka before heading off to rest before the next event started. Itsuka was resting on a chair located near the entrance to the arena. The pro heroes with destructive quirks were tearing down the maze to make room for the next challenge, so it would be a bit before she'd have to enter again. The last event was rough. Only the first 42 students had managed to qualify for the next event, most of them being from Class 1A and Class 1B. Itsuka felt like she got lucky with the path she chose to get out of the maze, not to mention how she might have detrimented the students who were behind her by using her quirk to lift rocks and use them as obstacles she had put behind her. Itsuka wasn't happy about the fact that she had to detriment others, but she knew that she had to score a high place in the sports festival if she wanted to be noticed by the pros. Itsuka didn't think too much about the next challenge, though. Her thoughts were occupied by a certain green-haired boy. Her first impression of him had been a little underwhelming, to be honest. The poor guy seemed like he would faint just by talking to her. It's hard for her to believe that he was at the attack of the USJ. And the fact that he had managed to score first place on the maze challenge was even more outrageous. Itsuka's train of thoughts was interrupted when said green-haired boy came out of the nursery with a bandage around his left pinky finger. He looked down, more emotionally than physically. Itsuka knew that it was probably best to stay away for now and let him recover. But her curiosity got the best of her. Itsuka got up and approached the boy. Upon sensing her presence, Izuku looked up at her and noticed that she was smiling warmly at him, causing him to turn into a blushing mess. "Oh, hi, Kendo. Are you resting before the next event too?" said Izuku, looking everywhere except at Itsuka, who giggled in response. His nervous attitude was pretty cute for a hero in training, she thought. "Yes, actually. What about you, Midoriya? Seems like the last challenge got a lot out of you," said Itsuka, pointing to his broken finger. Izuku looked at his finger before thinking of an excuse. "Oh, well, I'm just a bit unexperienced with my quirk. That's all." Itsuka looked a bit frustrated. Why was everything about this guy so mysterious and wrong? Really, you're unexperienced with your quirk, the thing you were born with. Izuku started to panic internally. Well, it manifested not too long ago, Kendo. Kendo raised an eyebrow. "Really? When was it?" Izuku chuckled nervously. "A few hours before the entrance exam. Actually." Kendo's eyes widened in response. "What? Your quirk manifested just before the entrance exam? How the hell did you manage to get into UA? The entrance exam was tough." Izuku chuckled at Itsuka's reaction. I guess I was lucky." Itsuka raised an eyebrow at him. Izuku knew she wasn't convinced, so he kept trying to make excuses. "Well, I guess it helped that all might help train my quirk a little bit before the exam." That made Itsuka even more surprised. "So you're telling me not only did your quirk manifest just before the exam, not only did you somehow manage to get into UA without knowing fully well how your quirk worked, not only were you at the USJ incident and survived, not only did you somehow manage to win the previous challenge, but the #1 hero helped you train." Izuku's blushing worsened. "Why, yes, I know it's hard to believe, but..." Izuku was cut off when Itsuka interrupted. "Why did All Might train you of all people? Is it because you were new with your quirk? Is it because you met him before? Is it because you did something that caught his attention?" Izuku chuckled nervously. Well, I guess it's because our quirks are a bit similar, heh." Itsuka felt a bit envious that Izuku was trained by All Might of all heroes, but she also felt happy for him. Izuku seemed like a nice and sweet guy, so getting help from the #1 hero would be a great way to advance in his path of becoming a hero. So I take it that you still have a long way to go." Izuku's nervousness calmed down a bit at that comment. "Yes, I know I still have a long way to go, but I'm not gonna fall behind." Izuku's expression turned into a soft smile. "I've always looked up to All Might, and to have him as a teacher both at UA and outside school is a blessing, not to mention all the great people I got to meet when I enrolled into UA. I still can't believe I'm so blessed. Being here is a dream come true, and I'll reach for the stars if that's what it takes to keep being a hero." Itsuka's expression softened at that and her heart swelled at Izuku's words. It seemed like he adored being a hero. And the way he talked about his friends and his dream to become a hero, it was something heartwarming and wholesome. "Hey, you got that right. I feel the same way. My parents are probably watching the sports festival right now. I want to do the best I can to not let anyone down." Izuku looked at Itsuka with a big smile of his own. "I think you'll do amazing, Kendo." Itsuka smiles at his response before a siren echoes through the room. "Oh, looks like the next event is about to start. Let's go, Midoriya." Izuku smiles at Kendo and walks to the arena alongside her. "Let's do our best." The students were called to the center of the arena, which had been wiped clean of the concrete maze, but everyone was quick to notice that its borders looked strange for some reason. President Mike starts to talk, making the audience ecstatic for the next event. "That was a spectacular first event, wasn't it, everyone? But now's the time where our students will really step it up. It's time for our next event in the agenda, ladies and gentlemen." As soon as President Mike said that, the borders of the arena gave way for some strange-looking devices to rise. They looked like big metallic doors for some reason. "Everyone, get ready for our metal farm," shouted President Mike to the top of his lungs. The devices activated and created humanoid robots which immediately started to walk slowly towards the surprised student. "Our lovely contestants will have to break apart and destroy as many robots as possible before the time runs out. This gives you flashbacks of your entrance exam, doesn't it? Our participants are free to detriment each other as well as steal each other's kills, but they're not allowed to hurt each other. Let's see who can score the most points, because we're only accepting the first 8 places for the final event. Good luck, everyone. Get ready to rule on Blee." The robots ran like agile zombies towards the students, and the devices created more robots at fast speed. Bakugo smiled. Finally something not dumb. Make way, extras. I'll show you who's boss. Bakugo immediately propelled himself towards the robots and started to blast away. Todoroki's glare hardens. Arrogant as always, you won't surpass me, Bakugo. Todoroki starts to slide towards the robots and use his quirk to freeze the robots' feet in place before kicking them, breaking them apart. Ada's determined expression hardens. This is my chance. I will not waste it. Ada runs at the robots at full speed before kicking them using his quirk. None of the students paid any attention to Izuku, who froze in place. What the heck was he supposed to do now? His finger was broken and there was no way he would use his quirk right here or he'd be incapacitated. Could there be a way for him to score points without getting hurt? Aizawa notices Izuku's worried expression and sighs. This is what I'm talking about. These challenges need to be thought out better. Students with destructive quirks are bound to have an advantage over others. This isn't fair or logical. Present Mike laughs. Don't worry, Eraser. Our students from this year managed to enter UA through a similar entrance exam, didn't they? They're all going to be fine, said Present Mike before slapping Aizawa's back. I swear if you do that one more time. Below, things were heating up. Every single student was managing to score points one way or another. Even those with quirks that weren't very good in combat like Momo, Gyro or Aoyama were scoring points surely. Izuku thought about a way to score points without harming himself. His train of thoughts was interrupted when a robot ran towards him. Crap, Izuku thought to himself while he started to charge the power of One for All. However, the robot was suddenly crushed by a massive hand. Izuku deactivated his quirk at the sight of the crushed robot, and he looked in awe to the user who had saved him. His jaw practically hit the floor when he realized it was Itsuka Kendo herself. Itsuka giggled before shrinking her hands to pat Izuku's shoulder. Hey, what's wrong, Midoriya? Don't believe in yourself. Izuku looked at Itsuka with admiration. Kendo, was that your quirk? That's so cool. Your quirk could be used in many ways, like... Izuku started to ramble, but his rambling was cut short when Itsuka pushed him out of the way before a ball of solid concrete hit his head. Itsuka chuckled before looking back at the group of robots with a determined expression. Don't lose your focus, Midoriya. You're falling behind, you know. Itsuka proceeded to dash towards the robots and smacking them with her massive hands. Izuku looked at Itsuka in awe. She looked majestic while she fought. By the looks of it, she had experience in martial arts, which complemented the way she used her quirk. Kendo exhibited a graceful and almost dance-like quality in her motions, often incorporating spins, flips, and aggressive maneuvers into her attacks, which caught many people's attention, including Izuku's. Then, Izuku snapped out of his trance. He had to score at least some points if he wanted to move on. But what to do? Izuku's attention turned towards the robot Itsuka had smashed into bits, and he realized that there were two details that stuck out. The robot had a small number 10 painted on the right side of its head, and the robot had some sort of small battery inside its head, similar to the robot he had deactivated in the previous challenge. These robots were probably made by the same people, and so they could probably be beaten the same way. Izuku looked towards the direction the concrete ball that almost hit him came from, and he realized that there were some robots that wore small concrete guns that shot small concrete balls, not big or solid enough to seriously injure someone, but enough to hurt. Izuku leaned his head and realized that those robots had a small number 25 painted on their head. That was it. A solid plan started to form on his own head. But before he could do anything, he realized that the arena was out of robots. Oh no, said Izuku to himself as the last robot was blown away by Bakugo. Bakugo looked at everyone else with a malicious smirk. Huh, suck on that. Bakugo was currently in first place with 340 points, with Todoroki being in second place at 335 points and Ida scoring third place with 320 points. Izuku was at the bottom, having done nothing at all during the wave of robots. Izuku was about to tear up, but the sound of Present Mike's voice through the speakers stopped him. Present Mike grabbed the microphone. Congratulations, challengers. Stage 1 of 1 million complete. Everyone audibly gasped at that, except Bakugo. He can't be serious, said Uraraka to herself. Todoroki sighed in acceptance while Ada chopped the air in disapproval. This is highly unacceptable. Who was responsible for the design of this challenge? And if that was a joke, I personally don't find it humorous. Itsuka was so surprised she almost cursed. There's no way we're making it to stage 1 million. My hands already hurt. Bakugo, however, huffed and crossed his arms. You're all a bunch of crybabies. Bring me all the garbage scraps you want. I'll blow every last one of them away. The devices on the edges of the arena embiggened slightly before starting to generate bigger robots that wore armor. Present Mike took it as a sign to announce the next round. Stage 2. AAND begin. The students groaned before dashing at the robots again. Izuku, however, was happy. With the knowledge he had gained, at least he could do something. The robots of the second wave were bigger and tougher than the others. They wore chest armor and a helmet while their concrete weapons were shooting at a faster rate. The students' quirks had a harder time trespassing their armor, like Mina Ashido's acid or Aoyama's laser. Who made these things? They're insane, cried out Mina as she dodged a ball of concrete. For once, I have to agree with you, mademoiselle, said Aoyama, clutching his stomach and running away from an incoming robot. Izuku took advantage of the retreating students before charging towards the robots, an action that didn't go unnoticed by many people, including Itsuka. Midoriya, what's he doing? Thought Itsuka as Izuku reached the robots. The robot took a swing at him, but he effectively dodged the robot's punch and clung to the robot's back. Izuku proceeded to tear the back of the robot's head off to reveal the battery powering it. When Izuku threw the battery away, deactivating the robot, he noticed his score of 0 points rise to 25. There, Izuku smiled to himself before getting off the robot's back and running towards another one of the big robots. Itsuka looked at him in disbelief. Did he really do that? Did he notice something she failed to see? Either way, he seemed like he was finally doing something, and it seemed to work for him so far. Itsuka smiles at Izuku from afar before focusing on the robots again. However, not everyone was happy. Bakugo, Todoroki and Ida looked on in disbelief. Todoroki simply ignored Izuku and tried to focus on his own technique to beat the robots while Ida growled a little before doing the same. Bakugo, however, snarled. Damn nerd, you won't surpass me, Deku. Bakugo propelled himself to the nearest group of robots he could find and started to blow them up with murderous intent. Itsuka took notice of Bakugo's behavior. Geez, was he always like this with Midoriya? Do they have some sort of backstory I don't know about? Everyone else was too focused on the robots to care about Izuku or Bakugo. The students were giving it their best shot, with many using their quirks to the point of exhaustion in order to win. Izuku was no exception. He was ripping off as many batteries as he could, but he was getting tired as well. His score was going up thanks to him focusing solely on the robots with concrete guns due to them being worth 25 points. But it was nowhere near enough to catch up to Ida, Bakugo, and Todoroki. Luckily for everyone, the second wave of robots was over by now. Many students dropped to their knees as their fatigue caught up to them. Everyone looks at the scores again. Although everyone's scores were different, Bakugo, Todoroki, and Ida were still in first, second, and third place respectively, having 680 points, 665 points, and 630 points each. Izuku's score had risen to 225, but he was still nowhere near the top. President Mike took the microphone again. Don't worry, dear contestants. We know you're tired, so perhaps it's time to skip to the end of the challenge. Many students nodded furiously at that. Good. I hope you're ready. Prepare yourselves. President Mike's voice grew deeper and lower, like a wrestling commentator. For stage 1 million. Suddenly, a big hole was opened in one side of the arena. From it, a huge robot, the size of 3 houses, rose from the ground. The students were struck with awe and a slight twinge of fear. President Mike giggles. I see your smiles. Uraraka yelled from the arena. No one is smiling. The robot generating devices on the sides of the arena retreated to the ground where they came from to make way for the giant robot to move. Many students keep their distance from the robot, although some stand their ground, the majority of those being from Class 1A. Itsuka thought about running away, but seeing Class 1A stand their ground made her look at them with an awestruck expression. They face a great threat, and they don't back down, not even Midoriya. Itsuka looked over at Izuku, who was clearly scared, but was willing to stand his ground nonetheless. The robot went for a punch to the ground, which the students dodged with ease. Bakugo huffs before propelling himself towards the robot's face. However, unbeknownst to him, this robot was prepared. The robot senses Bakugo approach, and it slaps him away. Izuku yells his childhood friend's name in concern for his well-being. Kicchan. Bakugo crashes down on the floor with a loud thud, smashing his head hard and being knocked out briefly. Izuku looks at the robot with an angry glare. He knows this robot is meant to be faced by students, so there must be some way to defeat him easily. Something the pros who designed it must have left on purpose like they did on the other challenges. Izuku squints his eyes and notices that the robot is especially armored on its waist, like there's something important it needs to protect. That's it, everyone. Izuku calls out to his classmates, who look at him despite being scared themselves. There, in his waist, the entirety of Class 1 looks at the robot's waist, and they immediately pick up on what Izuku is putting down. Momo nods and turns to the rest of the students who decided to stay. Astute observation, Midoriya, Kirishima, Takoyami, Sato. Your quirks are strong, so I trust that you can attack its legs to make it lose balance. The trio nod and Kirishima slams his fists together in anticipation. Got it. Momo turns to Todoroki, Mina, Ida, and Kaminari. E4 will attack the robot as much as you can to distract it even further. Got it. Her classmates nod. Momo nods and turns to her other classmates. Everyone else, attack that spot. It might be the key to defeating it. Stick to the plan. Class 1 nods before dashing towards the giant robot. Kirishima, Takoyami, and Sato do as instructed and begin to pummel at the robot's legs. The robot loses balance, and before it can recover, Todoroki creates multiple ice slides around the robot for Kaminari and Mina to slide through. Mina shoots constant barrages of acid at the robot's face. Kaminari jumps at the robot to shock it quickly, and Ida jumps between slides, kicking the robot while he's in the air. The rest of the class focus on attacking the robot's waist. Class 1B looks on in awe. Itsuka's eyes widen in reaction to Class A's impressive teamwork, smiling fondly. However, one blonde boy was having none of it. Said blonde boy steps forward and speaks to his classmates in an aggressive yet inspirational tone. Guys, we need to get it together. We can't let the sports festival be a giant show-off for Class 1A, can we? Itsuka merely rolls her eyes at Monoma's comment, but one of her classmates, known as Tetsu, agrees with him. Yeah, come on, guys. Class A is only strong because they survived the USJ incident, and they have grown stronger as a team because of it. Let's get out there and show the world that Class B can be strong too. Class B nods before heading out. Under any other circumstances, Itsuka would have chopped Monoma's neck to keep him in line as a big sister would do, but she had to admit it would be nice to join Class A in the spotlight. Without thinking it twice, Itsuka followed her classmates on their battle against the robot. Yui embiggens several piles of debris nearby, and Ryuko throws them to the robot's face using her poltergeist, helping out the very confused Mina and Kaminari. Where did you guys come from? Asks Kaminari, to which Monoma laughs. You didn't think we'd let you have all the glory and fame, did you? Supporting characters can shine too, says Monoma as he jumps into an ice slide, copying Ada's quirk and joining him on the ice slides created by Todoroki, kicking the robot in the air. Ada feels a bit offended at having his personal space invaded, but he allows it for the occasion. On a lap in which they cross paths, Monoma slaps Kaminari, copying his quirk and shocking the robot each time he comes in contact with it. Hey, not cool, dude, says Kaminari, to which Monoma simply laughs. Cry about it, says Monoma as he keeps sliding around the robot. Rin shoots scales at the robot from the distance, while Shota picks up several pieces of concrete and throwing them at the robot, amplifying the hit with his quirk. Tetsu and Ibara join Kirishima, Sato, and Takoyami with the robot's legs, Ibara holding one of his legs with her vines and Tetsu pummeling away next to Kirishima. Kirishima looks at Tetsu with a surprised smile. Hey, man, glad you could make it. Tetsu returns Kirishima's smile with a pointy grin of his own. We're not letting you guys hog all the spotlight, man. Sides, we're glad to be here. Present Mike was ecstatic. WOWWW. A cooperation between participants in a free-for-all challenge. This is something unheard of. The students' attacks tear open a hole in the robot's waist, and there, a giant battery in a metal container lay unguarded. Izuku hurried towards Uraraka. Uraraka, can you make me float? Uraraka smiles and touches Izuku's chest, making him float. Deku, that thing is way too high up. Someone needs to give you one heck of a boost. Izuku turned towards the rest of his class, but before he could get anyone's attention, he felt a massive hand wrap around his body. Izuku turned his head and saw Itsuka holding him with a big smile. Get over there and kick that thing's ass. As soon as those words left Itsuka's lips, she threw Izuku with all the strength she could muster towards the robot. As Izuku approached the robot, he felt a bittersweet feeling wash over him. He knew this could incapacitate him, but it would be fine by him. This would ensure that he went noticed by many people in the audience, and it would ensure that none of his classmates got hurt. It sucked that he possibly wouldn't get to participate in the next events, but it would be worth it if he could save others. Sayonara. Sports festival, it was good while it lasted, thought Izuku to himself as he approached the robot. Come on, Deku, imagine the egg in the microwave, it won't explode, come on, you got this. Izuku clenched his fist as he approached the robot's waist, and he activated the power of One for All. He hoped he could be able to reduce the amount of damage he received, but it was up to his luck at this point. Detroit SMASH. Izuku punched the battery with all his might using his left arm. The robot's waist exploded completely, sending most students back. The robot fell over on the ground and stopped moving once it hit the ground. The sound of the explosion was enough to wake Bakugo up, who was being treated by the medical staff before his rude awakening. AGH. Who the? Bakugo looked around him to figure out whatever happened. He was greeted by the sight of a pile of smoke rising from the ground and many of his classmates being scattered around the arena, a little hurt but smiling enthusiastically. What got his attention the most was the sight of Izuku Midoriya being thrown away into the air. Uraraka noticed it too, and she deactivated her quirk to make Izuku fall to the ground. Izuku was barely conscious, but when he realized he was falling to the ground, he let out a loud scream. Wah! Just as Izuku was about to hit the ground, Itsuka enlarged her hand and caught him like a professional baseball player would catch the ball before it hit the ground. Once Izuku realized he was safe, he turned towards Itsuka with a weak smile. "Thanks." Itsuka smiled at him before helping him get to his feet. "No problem. Hey, are you okay? Can you walk? Do you need me to carry you or?" Izuku chuckled before grabbing his left arm in pain. "I think I'm fine, but I need to go to the nursery." The medical staff moved away from Bakugo and carried Izuku towards the nursery. Itsuka watched from behind with a pensive expression. This boy sure proved to be more interesting than she initially thought. He, along with his class, managed to defeat a seemingly unstoppable threat standing their ground. Perhaps the praise people gave to Classa wasn't unfounded after all, even though her own class had also helped in defeating the robot. Itsuka knew Classa had taken the first step, much to the dismay of Monoma and Tetsu. Itsuka chuckled at the thought of Monoma and Tetsu fuming at Classa for being credited for the victory. Although, there was something else that was bothering Itsuka. This challenge felt too extreme. Why did the pros in charge of the events choose to put together such an extreme challenge? Did the pro heroes have ulterior motives in mind? Plus, how would they split the points after this? Itsuka decided to not dwell on the matter and go visit Izuku in the nursery. The guy had dealt the finishing blow to the big baddie, after all. Uraraka had watched Itsuka catch Izuku and get him to firm ground safely. She didn't know why, but for some reason she couldn't explain, she felt a little off when she saw their interaction. Uraraka didn't know exactly what she was feeling, but she definitely felt something. Uraraka decides to put those feelings aside for now and walk to the waiting room to focus on the final event of the sports festival. On the other hand, Bakugo looked at the arena in disbelief. What the actual hell had happened? Did he get disqualified? Did he pass? There were many questions and feelings roaming around his head. But the biggest feeling he was experiencing was anger. Anger towards himself for being reckless. Anger towards Deku for always chasing after him. Anger towards the people behind this dumb event for surprising them with a nearly impossible challenge. At the end, all he could do for now was wait for the final results. Izuku woke up in the nursery. He looked to his left arm and noticed that it was all bandaged up. Seems like imagining the egg in the microwave served to not break his arm entirely, although it didn't prevent him from getting serious injuries in his arm. Izuku looked beside him and he saw Itsuka standing next to the window, looking outside with a thoughtful expression. "Kendo." Hearing his voice, Itsuka snapped out of her train of thoughts and turned towards him, smiling brightly at him. "Midoriya, are you okay? That was insane." Izuku chuckles before smiling softly at her. "I'm just a little roughed up." "What happened? Did I miss much?" Itsuka lets out a little sigh. "Thank goodness you're okay. You didn't miss much, honestly. The staff is currently preparing the arena for the final event, and our scores will be revealed in a bit." Izuku looks down. "Oh man, I should have found some other way to destroy that robot. I'll be lucky if they let me participate in the final event, assuming that I get enough points to qualify in the first place." Itsuka smiles before ruffling his hair softly. "Don't beat yourself up over it. That punch was amazing. The way you and your class cooperate is awesome." Izuku's nervous demeanor returns upon feeling Kendo ruffle his hair, and he blushes madly. Well, it was nothing special, Kendo. You looked amazing out there yourself. You looked majestic." Itsuka blushes slightly at Izuku's comment, and she playfully shoves his face away from her as lightly as she can. "Og, get out of here. You were the one with the big finishing punch." Izuku laughs softly and looks at Itsuka with a smile of his own. "I am serious, though. I'm sure everyone thinks you did better than I did. All I did was finish that thing off. No biggie." Itsuka giggles. "You need to stop being so humble, Midoriya. You are awesome out there and you need to recognize it." Izuku giggles and looks away. "How well, I'm just not used to standing out. That's all." Itsuka raises an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Izuku looks down. "Why yes, not many people believed in me before, so I'm kinda used to not being in the spotlight." Itsuka thinks for a moment before patting his head softly. "Well, if it helps, you have at least one person who believes in you now." Izuku looks at Itsuka with a surprised expression. This feeling, the feeling of having someone who believes in you, it was one he hadn't experienced many times before, but it was one that made his heart swell with warmth. Izuku felt like he could tear up, but he contained himself. Thank you, Kendo, it means a lot." Itsuka smiles and places her hand on Izuku's bandaged arm. "Still, you need to take care of yourself more, Midoriya. You can't keep getting hurt like this." Izuku sighs and looks down. I know everyone keeps telling me that, but I can't help myself. I've always wanted to be a hero who saves everyone. And what kind of hero doesn't put themselves on the line to protect others?" Itsuka feels conflicted about Izuku's response. She admired his resilience and his determination to save others, but she really didn't like the fact that he was willing to go to such lengths to do it. "Midoriya, listen, I know this'll sound weird coming from me since we don't know each other very well, but could you do me a favor?" Izuku looks up at Itsuka with a confused expression. Alright, Kendo. What is it? Itsuka places her hand on Izuku's right hand and looks at him with a concerned expression. Just promise me you'll take it easier on the next event if you do make it to the finals, okay? Please don't hurt yourself. You're a genuinely nice guy, and I don't like to see good people like you get hurt. Can you do that for me? Izuku looks at Itsuka for a moment, surprised by her gesture. After a moment, he smiles at her and nods his head. Yes, I promise I'll take care of myself more, Kendo. Itsuka smiles and withdraws her hand. Good, thanks, Midoriya. They both stay in the nursery for another minute, relaxing in each other's presence. After the relaxing minute ends, Itsuka snaps out of her trance. Well, I gotta get back out there. It won't be long until our scores are announced. Get some rest, Midoriya. Izuku also snaps out of his trance and nods. Yeah, thank you, Kendo. See you later. Itsuka walks out of the room with her head hung low. Truthfully, she didn't think Izuku would get to the finals at all. Not after such a reckless attack. She still meant every word she said, though. She might not know his full story, but Itsuka could tell that Izuku was a very nice person, and it would be tragic if something happened to him. Despite that, Itsuka felt somewhat at ease believing that Izuku wouldn't get to the finals at all, and even if he did, there was no way he'd be allowed to compete in his current state. Outside, the crowd is roaring in anticipation. The arena was finally clean again, and the scores of the final students were ready to be revealed. President Mike grabs the microphone and hypes the crowd up. Suo, are you all ready to see who are the lucky contestants to move on to the final stage of the sports festival? Everybody say hey. The crowd does as told. Aizawa sighs and contemplates leaving the commentator's booth. I still stand by what I said. This challenge was one of the worst ones I've seen in any sports festival we've had so far. President Mike chuckles. Don't be such a party pooper, Eraser. Our students managed to defeat our 1 million point robot after all, didn't they? Aizawa groans. Remind me why I'm here again. President Mike chuckles again. Why don't you look at our students' final scores instead? Pay close attention, everyone, because these will be the 8 lucky individuals to participate in the last event, the battle tournament. And our winners are. President Mike points to the screens of the stadium. The screens reveal the final 8 participants of the sports festival. Izuku Midoriya, Shoto Todoroki, Tenya Ida, Fumikage Takoyami, Ijiro Kirishima, Tetsu, Ochako Uraraka, Katsuki Bakugo. Wowie, looks like this'll be one tough final event, don't you think so, Eraser? Said President Mike from the commentator's booth. Aizawa groaned. How about you present the last event instead of blowing my ear off, Yamada? President Mike laughs. Sure do. I'm sure our lovely audience is fuming with anticipation about our last event. Isn't that right, everyone? The audience cheers. Good, because our last students are about to duel it out the old-fashioned way. Let's applaud for the final event, the battle tournament. The audience cheers and roars, waiting eagerly for the battle tournament to start. Itsuka had gone back to the stands for a bit. She was still hoping she'd gotten through to Midoriya, since he was in pretty bad shape. His muscles had taken more damage than his bones. But it was still dangerous for him to go out and fight in the final event if he were to pass. Itsuka was glad that Izuku wouldn't get to participate in the next event and could stay safely in bed watching from a safe distance the sports festival finish. Or at least that's what she would have liked to think. Itsuka froze when she saw Izuku's name on top of the leaderboard. Who the actual hell had allowed him to continue? Itsuka tried to contain her emotions, but she couldn't suppress a groan of frustration at the thought of the green-haired boy and his resilience. He was definitely not in good shape, but from all she's figured out from him thus far, he would definitely try to compete in this final event despite his physical state. Itsuka groaned, since she had just arrived at the stands and she already had to go back to the infirmary again. But she knew she had to prevent Izuku from participating. He was in no shape to compete, and he had to see that one way or another. Itsuka sighed before leaving the stands. As she passed the other students, she couldn't help but notice a very angry-looking Bakugo staring at the leaderboard with disbelief written across his expression. Her first impression of the guy wasn't a very good one, given the way he claimed he'd best everyone at the beginning of the sports festival, but for some reason he seemed to have a personal score to settle with Midoriya. Yet another thing to ask him about, thought Itsuka as she left the stands. Izuku couldn't believe it himself. He was just getting up from the bed he was resting on, and he immediately saw his name on top of the leaderboard, ensuring his participation at the final event of the sports festival. He thought for sure that he would be allowed to continue after his injury, but for some reason he was still allowed to press on. His train of thoughts was interrupted when the door to his room opened, and All Might stepped in his deflated form. Izuku looked away from the TV screen on his room and looked towards his mentor with a surprised expression. All Might, what are you doing here? All Might smiles. I came here to tell you some stuff you'd probably like to know about, kid. Izuku raises an eyebrow and sits on the bed. Well, to be honest, there's some stuff I was wondering myself. All Might chuckles. You're surprised about everything that happened in the last event, right? Izuku looks at All Might with a surprised expression for a moment before letting out a chuckle. Why yeah, how did I manage to qualify for the final event? I thought I did awful. All Might's expression falls a bit and he sits down next to Izuku. Listen, kid, there's a lot of stuff surrounding this particular sports festival that has affected its development. Ever since the USJ was attacked, there's been a rising part of the public who want a clear vision of a safe future. Society's been pretty nervous, and some people are even starting to doubt my ability to keep my students safe. Izuku's expression turns to a shocked one. What? But you're All Might. You're the symbol of peace. How can people doubt you after one little incident you didn't have much chance to do anything in? All Might giggles and pats Izuku's shoulder to calm him down. And yet, students were endangered all the same. I know I couldn't do much at the beginning, but the fact is that it still happened. And people don't want something like that to happen ever again. Can you blame them, though? If I had a kid, I would like them to be and feel safe at their school, even more so if that school is UA of all places. Izuku calms down after listening to All Might's words and sighs. I get it, but how does that affect the sports festival? All Might looks at the TV screen in the room with a pensive expression. The sports festival is a golden chance for students to be noticed by pro heroes. But after the USJ incident, the pros will be looking for exclusively the best hero material to ensure the peaceful future society desperately wants. Surely you must have noticed the smaller number of students who qualified for the final event, right? Izuku nods. I did. I've watched every sports festival with my mom since I was a kid. And there were always 16 students who participated in the battle tournament. All Might nods as well. This time the number has been reduced to 8 so that the pros as well as society can focus on the most promising of the bunch. Izuku looks at the screen again with a concerned expression. But if that's the case, then how did I qualify? I know I didn't do as well as everyone else like Kaken or Todoroki. All Might smiles. Like I said, the people have been on the lookout for the most promising of the bunch. You seem to fit their standards, kid. Everyone saw the way you plowed through the first event and the way you beat that robot at the end of the second challenge. Talent like that was bound to be noticed by the pros. The judges had to justify a lot and use a lot of technicalities, but they made sure you made it to the next event. Congratulations, young Midoriya. Izuku felt a bittersweet sensation in his heart. He appreciated the pros giving him a chance to keep going in the sports festival. But at the same time, it felt like he didn't earn that place. Plus, they could have given that place to someone who actually did well in the second challenge, like Itsuka for example. All Might, I don't know about this. I'm not sure if I'm worthy of competing in the final event. It feels unearned. Izuku looked down, but All Might delivered a swift chop to the top of Izuku's head to snap him out of the blue. Don't be such a worrywart, kid. The people love you, so own it. Izuku looks at All Might with a pained expression, although he smiles through the quick pain. All right, All Might, but how did I get to the top? I thought I fell behind at the beginning. All Might smiles again. That robot was supposed to guarantee 10 million points to whoever took it down, but since it was a team effort from all of you, the judges didn't know how to split the points. Everyone saw you deliver the finishing blow to the robot, so they thought they might as well give them to you. Izuku looks at his mentor with a surprised expression. What? They gave me the 10 million points, but everyone gave it their best shot. Why me of all people? All Might chuckles. Like I said, they had to use a lot of technicalities to make sure you passed, and that was one of them. Izuku looks genuinely baffled. All Might laughs at his reaction before placing his hand on Izuku's shoulder. But enough about that. Let's discuss your tactic to actually win the sports festival, young Midoriya. Izuku snaps out of his reverie and looks at All Might with some concern. He genuinely thought he wasn't going to move on to the final event, so he had absolutely no idea of what to do in order to win. My tactic. Yeah, your tactic. You're up against young Todoroki. Do you have a plan that doesn't involve getting yourself severely injured with the use of One for All? Izuku blinks. He didn't expect to be paired up against Todoroki of all people. He didn't know the guy very well, but Todoroki seemed like an unstoppable force thus far. The way he used his quirk, his stamina, his training, it was almost perfect. How to win against someone who is just better than you in every way? Well, I don't know yet. I mean, Todoroki's father must have put him through an intense training to get him to where he is now. I don't have nearly as much experience with One for All yet. All Might sighs, his expression falling at the mention of the man who has been blocking his friendship for years. Ah, yes, Endeavor is quite the individual. We spoke once 10 years ago, and he hasn't spoken to me ever since. He's so focused on surpassing me that he often forgets what makes a symbol. I worry about young Todoroki sometimes. I hope Endeavor's hatred for me doesn't manage to affect the souls of his family members, especially young Todoroki's. Izuku looks down. Well, I stumbled upon him and Kaken on the first challenge. They both want to surpass me, but Todoroki looked like he was hiding something. I know Kaken likes to prove himself better than everyone else, but Todoroki seems to have a special kind of competitive attitude against me. Do you think it's because you're often seen close to me? All Might sighs and looks away, getting up from the bed. I sure hope not. Otherwise, Endeavor's hatred for me will have truly gone too far. All Might looks back at Izuku with a smile. But let's try not to think about that. If I'm not mistaken, young Kirishima and young Tetsu are battling on the first round of the battle tournament. Try to use this time to think of a good tactic to fight against young Todoroki, kid. Izuku looks at All Might with a soft smile. I will. And All Might thanks for giving me a chance. All Might chuckles. You gave yourself that chance when I met you, kid. You haven't let me down ever since. All Might smiles at Izuku one last time before leaving the room. Izuku looks at the TV and notices that Kirishima and Tetsu are indeed the first ones to fight in the battle tournament. Izuku decides to lay on the bed for the time being to think of a plan to beat Todoroki. Everything about his soon-to-be opponent was almost perfect, from the way he used his quirk to his analytical skills. Yet there were two details that Izuku noticed when Todoroki was using his quirk. He only used his right side to create ice while refusing to use his left side. And he looked rather sad and angry. Outside, All Might made his way back to his place, making sure that nobody recognized him. Had he looked to the left side of the door, he would have seen a very surprised-looking Itsuka, who had been listening to their entire conversation. She heard Izuku talking to a guy that presumably was All Might. But the only person she saw exit through the door was a very skinny-looking blonde man with sunken eyes and hollow cheeks. There must have been some sort of mistake from someone, she thought. Itsuka didn't give the man much importance, since her mind was already running wild with all the information she managed to get from the conversation. So that's why that last event was too extreme. The pros must have wanted a way to separate the best from everyone else, thought Itsuka as she kept herself hidden around the corner. Now the absurdity of the last challenge made sense somewhat. Still, it was a little harsh of them to put such a challenge at the end. Itsuka looked down for a moment, letting her emotions take over briefly. She came to the sports festival hoping to be noticed by the pros and to not disappoint everyone who was watching her. The way things ended was very unpleasant. If the pros really wanted to weed out the weak from the strong, did it mean that she wasn't good enough? Was it a matter of luck? As the class president, it felt like she had failed in a way. Itsuka decided to not dwell on the matter for now. She had enough on her plate already, and she didn't need to add some self-esteem issue in as well. Itsuka also thought about the way Izuku talked to that man about his quirk. What did Izuku mean when he said that his quirk was similar to All Might's quirk? All Might's quirk was an unsolvable mystery to everyone, but now that she thought about Izuku punching the giant robot, she couldn't help but see the similarity he shared with All Might. Although, what really got Itsuka's attention at the moment was Izuku planning to beat Todoroki in the next event. Of course he's gonna fight. I should have known. That idiot, thought Itsuka in frustration. She had to admit, Izuku was definitely more interesting than she thought, but it was so damn infuriating to her seeing him trying so hard at stuff that will ultimately end up hurting him. She was mad at the judges for letting him compete in the next round, but she knew it was because Izuku didn't deserve to suffer like this. One of the reasons Itsuka became a hero is because she hates seeing innocent people get hurt, and Izuku was definitely someone who was worth protecting. For a moment, Itsuka's mind told her to just barge in the room and prevent him from participating in the battle tournament. Her mind told her to tie him down to the bed if it was necessary so he wouldn't get hurt. She was about to enter the infirmary and give him the scolding of a lifetime if he thought he was going to participate in the next event. That's what she came here for after all, right? However, she remembered the promise he made to her. He had promised to take care of himself more. He had to do it right. If Izuku looked at her in the eye and swore to not take it too hard, then he'd have to deliver on his promise, right? It was his word. He had given his word to her. Then it hit Itsuka. Hang on a second, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this in the first place? He's some guy I met not too long ago. We're not even in the same class. Why do I even care so much? Itsuka huffed before returning to the stands with a small blush in her face. She couldn't believe she let her emotions get the better of her. If the guy was so determined to fight despite his current state, then let him. She had more important things to do anyway. Itsuka returns to the stands. She scans the seats and notices that some students of her class are talking to students of class. It was clear that the robot incident managed to ease some of the tension between the classes. Bakugo had started up with his little superiority speech at the beginning of the sports festival. Itsuka looked to the side of her class and saw a very irritated Nido Monoma sitting on the corner furthest away from class with a frustrated expression. That meathead sure is stubborn. He'll get over it eventually, thought Itsuka to herself with a small giggle. Then, she spotted Bakugo apart from the rest of his class. He looked just as pissed as when she left some minutes ago, and his anger hadn't wavered in the slightest. Itsuka thought about Izuku again. He mentioned someone called Kaken in his conversation, and the only person she could think of with that nickname was Bakugo. But no way. There was no way he had such an innocent nickname for an enraging sociopath like Bakugo. Itsuka was feeling bold, so she decided to approach Bakugo to get as much out of him as possible. Bakugo sensed someone approaching him. He looked to the side and spotted some red-headed girl approaching him with a smile. He scoffed and looked away. "What do you want, extra?" Itsuka sighed. "Wow, still as arrogant as ever, huh, chum?" Bakugo snarls and looks at Itsuka with condescending disdain. "I said what? Do you want extra?" Itsuka crosses her arms and looks at Bakugo with a serious expression. "I want to know what's itching you, pal. All I've seen you do is act like you own the damn place and act hatefully towards Midoriya." Bakugo scoffs and looks away at the mention of his childhood friend. "Don't mention that nerd. He somehow managed to cheat his way to the final event. If I get my hands on him, I'll..." Itsuka chuckles. "Wow, so you're not even trying to hide the fact that you target him specifically. What's so wrong about him to you?" Bakugo looks at Itsuka with a glare. "That useless wannabe has always been chasing after me. I don't know if he thinks he's better than me, but I'm not gonna let some worthless nerd like him surpass me, and you better not be thinking of doing the same. I'm number one around here, got it?" Itsuka squints her eyes at Bakugo. "I don't know him very well yet, but Midoriya doesn't seem to be the guy that looks down on anyone, unlike your pathetic self who gets his kicks pushing around others. This is typical bully mentality, lashing out over some wounded pride or insecurity." Bakugo's glare hardens, and he makes small explosions in his hands. "You're lucky you're not in the final event, or I would have blasted that smug face off your head, orange hair." Itsuka huffs and walks away. "Whatever, just enjoy the rest of the event if you are even able to." Bakugo and Itsuka mutter to themselves. "Skank, asshole. Well, that went about as smooth as a cactus with knives on a rocky mountain." The comment he made about her not getting to the final event stung a little, but she attributed it to his aggressive attitude overall and not something personal against her. What was up with that guy? Why was he so hellbent on targeting Izuku of all people? They definitely had some sort of backstory for him to act this way towards Izuku only. And yet again, another thing I need to ask Midoriya about, thought Itsuka to herself as she made her way to her seat. At least it was nice to see that some members of her class were getting along with Class A, even if two particular blondes weren't interested in bonding yet. Itsuka decided to forget about the two blondes and focus on the match below. Tetsu and Kirishima were currently fighting, but neither was able to get some sort of advantage over the other. They had similar quirks, similar fighting styles, and similar levels of endurance. They had been fighting for about 10 minutes with neither coming out on top. Then, the battle came to a head when the two opponents charged at each other with their fists raised. Kirishima and Tetsu had punched each other so hard that the sound was heard in the stands, with both opponents falling unconscious to the ground afterwards. Present Mike speaks in a bored tone. "Well, looks like our contestants are too equally matched. We'll have to move on to the next round while our participants wake up so that we can settle the score in some other way." "Agree." Midnight nods from the arena, looking at the two unconscious students and waving at the medical staff to take care of them. Izuku laid on the bed at the infirmary with his gaze fixated on the TV screen. Since Kirishima and Tetsu were knocked out at the same time, Takoyami and Ida were about to fight in their place. One part of Izuku's brain was focused on their incoming fight, since Izuku didn't know if Takoyami's quirk had any kind of weakness whatsoever. It would be hard to fight him if they were to be matched up in a later fight. However, most of Izuku's thoughts were directed at a certain girl with orange hair. Izuku didn't know her very well yet, but he could tell that Itsuka was amazing. The way she fought the robots using her quirk, her straightforward attitude, her prowess and majestic look when she fought, she was someone he definitely didn't want to let down, which is also why he was so nervous about his incoming fight. He had promised Itsuka to not injure himself more than he should, and he didn't know how to deliver on that promise, much less when he was supposed to fight Todoroki of all people. He knew he had more chances of winning if he used one for all against Todoroki, but the muscles on his arm were pretty roughed up after the last punch he threw. If he did it again, there were no guarantees that his arm wouldn't shatter completely. How to win against someone who had no drawbacks to their quirk, had the analytical skills of a pro, surely had some training before enrolling into UA, and harbored a pretty competitive attitude towards him. Izuku groaned mentally at the thought. Fighting Todoroki will be a pain, both literally and figuratively. He just hoped he could handle himself when the time came to not worry Itsuka anymore. On the arena, the match between Takoyami and Ida was just getting started. Ida began the match by dashing straight towards Takoyami and throwing a kick to his side. Dark Shadow. Shield. As those words left Takoyami's mouth, the monster living in his shadow manifested and covered him using his giant claws. Ida had to step back for a moment. Darn, Takoyami's quirk is stronger than what I thought. I won't beat him with strength alone. I have to be clever. As Ida stepped back, Takoyami went on the offensive, ordering Dark Shadow to chase him. At the sight of the shadow monster approaching, Ida activated his engines and ran across the arena. A very frustrated-looking Monoma sighs. This event is rigged. Most of it has been class of flaunting. Not a single one of us made it to the finals. Seems fishy to me. Itsuka chuckles and pats Monoma's shoulder. Well, you sure seem happy to be here, don't you? Monoma chuckles bitterly while looking at the match below. If I was the one battling down there, I would have given class a run for their money, and you know it, Kendo. Itsuka smirks, feeling grumpy like an old man. Monoma giggles. Not at all. Just disappointed in this event. I mean, we did help to defeat that thing on the last event. Kendo. Either way, who are the irresponsible judges in charge of this event anyways, and why didn't they allow more of us to qualify? Itsuka looks away for a moment, remembering the information Izuku and the person who supposedly was All Might talked about. She thought about revealing the information she learned to Monoma, but she bit her tongue at the last moment, knowing Monoma, revealing that information to him would only cause more turmoil between the sister classes. Well, I don't know, but maybe you should be glad you're not down there. Things seem pretty extreme. Monoma rolls his eyes. Whatever. I still don't like this, Kendo. Monoma goes back to looking at the match between Tokoyami and Ida, which now begins to take a more interesting turn. Ida was getting tired from running circles around Tokoyami, while Dark Shadow didn't seem to be getting tired at all. Ida knew that he should make one last effort to finish the match here or he'd collapse soon. Ida turns around and runs straight at Dark Shadow. Tokoyami orders Dark Shadow to attack. Ida smirks. You're strong, Tokoyami, but I am faster. Just as Dark Shadow was about to punch Ida slides on the floor and goes past the floating monster. Tokoyami's eyes widen in surprise while Ida makes one last sprint towards him. This is it. Ida jumps and moves his left leg to the side, ready to kick Tokoyami out of bounds. But then, oh no, Ida felt something grab his leg. He looked back to see Dark Shadow extending his arm and grabbing his leg with a firm grip. What in the world? He can change his size too. Ida didn't even have enough time to react before Dark Shadow threw him out of bounds. Midnight raises her arm at the sight of Ida flying out of the arena. Ida is out of bounds. Tokoyami moves to the semifinals. Tokoyami makes Dark Shadow retreat before bowing respectfully and walking out of the arena silently. On the other hand, Ida groans and gets to his feet, looking defeated. Why? Was I too slow? Did I fail to notice something important? Ida sighs before walking out of the arena with his head hung low. Sorry, brother, I have failed the Ida name. I must work harder from here. Itsuka notices that many people aren't quite satisfied with the result of this match. One particular person is Monoma himself, who is rolling his eyes and looking at Ida with disdain. Hey, what's got you so worked up? Why are you looking at Ida like that? Monoma sighs. I wasn't expecting much, but I was somehow still disappointed. I can't believe that idiot let himself lose with all he has going for him. Itsuka looks slightly offended. What do you mean, Monoma? Monoma gets up and walks away. Nothing you would understand, Kendo. I have to go to the bathroom. Itsuka groans and looks at the arena again. Why was Monoma so antagonistic of their sister class? Izuku found himself walking through the halls of the stadium, deep in thought. He heard that the last match was a victory for Tokoyami, which didn't calm his nerves one bit. He always had a knack for observing stuff others would dismiss, but Tokoyami's quirk was exceptional even for him. A shadow monster with no weaknesses, how on earth would he fight something like that? Izuku's train of thoughts was interrupted when the flame hero Endeavor stood in his path. Izuku immediately snapped out of his reverie and looked at Endeavor with wide eyes. Endeavor never had the friendliest of looks or expressions, but Izuku never had the chance to meet him face to face. The flame hero was even more intimidating in person. Endeavor, the number 2 hero, looks at Izuku with an amused expression. Ah, there you are. I've been looking for you. Izuku steps back in disbelief. And me? But why? I've been watching you closely since the sports festival begun. When it comes to power, yours is comparable to All Might's. Izuku tries to contain his shock, but his eyes betray the surprise he feels. What? But, listen, ever since Shoto was born he had a path that was carved out for him. He will surpass All Might. That's his path in life. When you fight against him, don't hold anything back. I want him to be prepared to surpass even myself. Izuku's shocked expression turns into a somber one. Is that what you want of me? Of him? Endeavor keeps speaking in a dead serious tone. Yes, you don't know how much struggle I've gone through to surpass All Might. Even if I am not capable of doing so, my bloodline will. It is Shoto's destiny to surpass All Might, and his match against you will be a good testing ground to see how much training he has left. Hit him hard. Don't disgrace yourself or him by restraining yourself. Endeavor turns around to leave. Izuku looks at his retreating form for a bit before a small glare forms in his eyes. Endeavor turns around, and his eyes widen slightly at the sight of Izuku glaring at him. You're right. I don't know what you've gone through to surpass All Might, sir, but I am not All Might. And the same goes for Todoroki. He might be your son, but he isn't you. Endeavor looks at Izuku with some intrigue before leaving. Izuku sighs when Endeavor leaves. The way Endeavor talked about his quirk made it sound like he knew about One for All. but it was impossible for him to know. Izuku knew that if there was one person who couldn't know about it, it was definitely Endeavor. Sometimes keeping the secret of one for all was tough. People weren't dumb, and many had gone too close to discovering the secret many times before, whether because Izuku was often seen around All Might, because their quirk effects were similar, because the way they moved was similar and stuff like that. Someone was bound to know about it sooner or later. All Izuku hoped was for the secret to come out when he was ready to deal with the situation. Or at the very least, he hoped he could share the secret with someone trustworthy. Outside, the crowd was cheering for the next battle to start. The two opponents approached each other with determined expressions, eager to win by whatever means necessary. The two contestants were none other than Uraraka and Bakugo, who wore determined expressions each. The girls of Class A looked at Uraraka with concern. "This might be the most disturbing battle so far," said Tsuyusui, concerned for the well-being of her best friend. Momo sighs. "Agreed. Uraraka must have some sort of plan up her sleeve if she wants to claim victory. I fear that Bakugo won't hold back." Mina tries to lighten up the mood. "Oh, come on, everyone. Have some faith in Uraraka. Girl is tougher than she looks." Gyro squints her eyes at the blonde boy below. "Maybe so, but Bakugo is an explosive sociopath. He better not hurt her severely or he'll regret it." The invisible girl known as Hagakure giggles. "Relax, everyone. Let's just cheer for her." In the infirmary, Izuku watched the incoming fight with concern. He knew Bakugo very well, and he knew he would never hold back, not even if his opponent was a girl. Izuku couldn't help but feel even more guilty for his injury. Perhaps he could have given some advice to Uraraka if he didn't get hurt, or he could have devised a plan to help her, or he could at least have given her some moral support. Either way, things just happened. He had a broken pinky finger, a very pained left arm, and no way to help Uraraka at all. Izuku sighs and sits on the bed, hoping that Uraraka could fend for herself. Then, the bell rings, signaling the beginning of the match. Bakugo reacted by blasting himself towards Uraraka. Uraraka barely had time to react, but she managed to dodge Bakugo's explosive hand at the last second. "Crap, he's serious," Uraraka thought to herself as she got up to her feet. Bakugo smirks before propelling himself towards Uraraka again. Uraraka extends her hand to use her quirk on him, which he notices. "Nice try," says Bakugo before setting off an explosion in front of him, sending Uraraka back. Bakugo walks to the site of the explosion, only to find that Uraraka is gone, and she left her jacket there as bait. Uraraka approaches Bakugo from behind, extending her hand. "Now is my chance. I'll win and be just like Deku." However, Bakugo's reflexes prove to be too much, and he turns around instantly, blowing Uraraka back with another explosion. The audience gasps, and they start to berate Bakugo verbally. On the other hand, Bakugo looks at his opponent with an intrigued expression. "She almost got me. Did Roundface get some plans from that nerd or something? But there's no way. Deku's been in the infirmary ever since the last event finished. Does that mean she's coming up with all of this on her own?" Uraraka immediately rushes towards Bakugo again, and he quickly sends her back again with another explosion. This process repeats numerous times, with Uraraka growing more and more exhausted as the battle goes on. The boys from Class A start to feel offended. Kirishima gets up from his seat. "Bakugo, not manly, man." Zero joins Kirishima. "She's just a girl, man. Can't you give her a break?" The audience starts to boo Bakugo. Aizawa notices this, and he quickly steps in front of the microphone. I think that Bakugo is acting accordingly to the challenge. He recognizes his opponent's strength, and he's making sure Uraraka doesn't take him by surprise, since she is a very strong opponent herself. Both opponents should be praised for using every tactic they know against each other in this tournament. Just as Aizawa says that, Uraraka smiles. "Hey, Bakugo." The explosive boy raises an eyebrow to the mention of his name. "Watch your head." Bakugo looks up to see a huge pile of debris and rubble floating above him, result of him using his quirk repeatedly. Uraraka presses the tips of her fingers together, releasing her hold on the debris to drop it on top of him. The audience stops booing Bakugo and stare in shock at Uraraka's plan. Aizawa smiles under his bandages, proud of his student. As the pile of rubble starts to fall, Uraraka runs towards Bakugo. Once he gets hit, he'll be too confused to see me approach. I'll make him float out of the arena with my quirk. Bakugo's surprise shows for a moment, but only for a moment. With one swift motion, Bakugo raises his arms and sets off a huge explosion on top of him, destroying Uraraka's plan and blowing her back in the process. Uraraka falls on her knees. "Come on, Ochako. Move, move. You can't let it end like this." The audience looks at Uraraka with amazed expressions. In the infirmary, Izuku looks on in awe. He expected Uraraka to put up a fight, but she certainly exceeded his expectation. Though, it looked like the match would end with her failure. Uraraka tries to get up, but her fatigue is already spreading to the rest of her body. "Come on, my body won't listen. I can't let Deku down." Why parents? Both classes look at Uraraka with adoration and amazement. The way she kept trying to push herself despite her low stamina was inspiring. Even to a certain blonde boy who hated the opposite class. Uraraka closes her eyes and succumbs to her exhaustion. Bakugo stands still, looking at Uraraka with a surprised expression, though he carried a new sense of respect for the gravity girl. Once Uraraka collapses, Midnight steps in and raises her arm. Uraraka is unable to continue. Bakugo moves on to the semi-finals. A few minutes pass after Bakugo's victory. Although the thing on everyone's mouths is Uraraka's determination and will to carry on instead of Bakugo. Class A were talking between themselves, praising Uraraka and regretting doubting her. Class B were mostly the same, although there was one boy that still didn't manage to snap out of his trance. Itsuka noticed this and moved away from the girls to speak to the boy. Monoma, what's up? That was some match, am I right? Monoma looks at Itsuka with some concern. Kendo, do you think we'll have to fight Class A sometime in the future? Itsuka raises an eyebrow, surprised by the question. Well, given that our teachers want us to be as prepared as possible, I wouldn't write off the possibility entirely. Why do you ask that of all things? Monoma looks back at the arena with a disturbed expression. I guess I don't feel ready yet. With people like that, it'll be pretty hard to surpass them. Itsuka sighs. She should have known. Really? You're still thinking about surpassing Class A? Monoma nods, causing Itsuka to facepalm. Look, I still don't understand why you hate Class A so much, but you have to tone it down, dude. You can't let your life be dictated by other people if you want to be happy. Monoma scoffs. That's easy for you to say. It's not like a side character like me has the same chances of surpassing a main character like her as someone like you, Kendo. Kendo is baffled. Side characters. What on earth was he on about? Monoma, I don't know what kind of world you're living in, but that's not how the real world works. There are no main or side characters. We're all real people. Monoma sighs. I don't expect a main character like you to understand, Kendo. Itsuka groans before walking to her seat. Look, the next match is about to start, and it'll be between Midoriya and that other boy who creates fire and ice. Can you please just forget about that whole main and side chat actors thing? You might just be going about things the completely wrong way. You could learn from this, actually. Monoma begrudgingly looks at the arena. Itsuka sure seemed to be interested in this match. He thought, it couldn't be because that green-haired guy was there, right? No, that's not it. Itsuka wouldn't affiliate with Class A scum. Although, it was weird that she already knew his last name. He was imagining things. There was simply no way Itsuka and that Midoriya guy knew each other. Meanwhile, Shoto Todoroki and Izuku Midoriya were standing on opposite sides of the arena, looking at each other with determined expressions. On the one hand, Todoroki was glaring at Izuku. He knew his father was watching this fight, and that he was hoping he'd use his left side. Todoroki would never use his fire, no matter what. He would never give that bastard the satisfaction of using his quirk. Not after all he's done to his mother and himself. He'd win first place without using his fire. On the other hand, Izuku was staring at Todoroki with mixed feelings. He felt determined to get as far as he could. He felt scared at Todoroki's sheer power and abilities. He felt worried about injuring himself more than he could. He felt intrigued by Todoroki's attitude so far, and he felt a twinge of guilt for being in that podium, whereas many more could have been in his place instead but couldn't due to the heroes behind the scenes pulling some strings for him. Nevertheless, Izuku remembered that Todoroki had something akin to a sworn rivalry with him. He knew Todoroki saw him as a rival he was bound to surpass, but there was something else underneath that cold exterior of his. Something tragic, almost. Still, Izuku knew that he couldn't let his own guard down. Izuku's plan wasn't much of a plan, as it was more of a concept. He planned to play defensive until the right opportunity presented itself. It just would be hard to do so when his left arm was still hurting and his pinky finger was broken. Then, the sound of the match starting snaps Izuku out of his train of thoughts. Todoroki started with an ice attack directed straight at his opponent. Izuku quickly reacted by raising his right arm and aiming his middle finger towards the incoming barrage of ice. Smash! Izuku shouted internally as he released his middle finger, effectively stopping the ice in its tracks and blowing it right back to Todoroki at the cost of his middle finger. Todoroki quickly created a small ice wall behind him to not be pushed out of bounds. When the wind calmed down, Todoroki looked towards Izuku and his middle finger. He was prepared to injure himself in order to stop the attack. Just as I expected, Present Mike started to get into the mood of the battle tournament after a boring first match, an underwhelming second match, and a bittersweet third match. Midoriya stopped Todoroki's attack. The camera zoomed in on Izuku's now broken middle finger, to which many people gasped, including Itsuka. What the? Is he really doing this now? That idiot. Itsuka groaned to herself as she saw Izuku injure himself as she specifically told him not to do. Todoroki got up to his feet before glaring at Izuku. Let's continue, Midoriya, said Todoroki in a low tone before launching another ice barrage at him. "Asamash!" shouted Izuku before deflecting the incoming ice attack with an attack from his index finger. Present Mike got more into the mood. While Aizawa glared at his student from the commentator's booth, he stopped it again. Izuku clenched his teeth in pain. Crap. I need to find some opening, but he attacks very quickly. It's almost impossible to get information out of him. Come on, Deku. Don't give up. No one is unbeatable, not even him. Just gotta keep observing him. Izuku looks to his arms. Great, that makes 3 broken fingers. I got 7 chances. Todoroki launches another ice barrage at Izuku, which he quickly deflects by aiming his right ring finger and releasing it. Great, 6 more chances. Meanwhile, Todoroki is getting frustrated. Midoriya, I'll end this quickly. Todoroki launches yet another ice barrage towards Izuku, which he deflects by aiming his right pinky finger at it and releasing it. Just as the wind calms down, Todoroki creates an upwards ice path to approach Izuku. Izuku looks up and sees Todoroki about to jump down at him, and he reacts by jumping backwards. Todoroki smashes the ground below him and creates a pile of ice. Todoroki looks at the retreating form of Izuku, and he expands the ice to encase him. Izuku looks on in horror as the ice envelops his foot. Crap, he's too close. Izuku thinks for a moment, before the power of One for All engulfs his injured left arm. Izuku punches in front of him, and a huge shockwave of air and ice expands across the stadium. Izuku cries out in pain as the already injured muscles on his right arm feel the weight of the power of One for All taking its toll on his bones. Izuku calms down as he sees that Todoroki is now standing on the opposite side of the arena, at a safe distance from him. The audience looks on in awe, and Izuku's classmates are no different. Itsuka is absolutely flabbergasted. What is he doing? 4 of the fingers on his right arm are broken and his left arm is busted. He can't keep doing this. Izuku notices that Todoroki is trembling slightly, although he seems to not be too bothered. Midoriya, that attack was more powerful than your last one's. Guess you really didn't want me getting close. Izuku looks down, clutching his left arm while Todoroki lets out an icy sigh, looking at his father with disdain. Thanks to you, he looks pissed. I've managed to get this far without using his quirk, and I plan to keep doing it to reject him entirely. You can't keep fighting with your arms in that state, can you? Let's just get this over with. Todoroki launches a final ice barrage towards Izuku, thinking that the fight is already over. Izuku looks up to Todoroki with a fired-up expression. Is that so? Todoroki is taken by surprise when Izuku also manages to somehow deflect this attack. Todoroki was so shocked that he was almost thrown out of bounds, but he managed to create an ice wall behind him just before falling off the arena. The audience looks on in awe. And when the cameras zoom in on Izuku, Todoroki understands what happened. You bastard, you used your broken index finger. You're trembling, Todoroki. Todoroki raises his eyebrows in surprise. Izuku is shaking, but he looks more determined than ever. Quirks are physical abilities. There's a limit to how much cold your body can take, right? Isn't that something you could solve using the heat from your left side? Todoroki clenches his teeth in frustration as Izuku keeps speaking. Izuku looks at his classmates briefly before continuing. Everyone is fighting with everything they've got in order to achieve their dreams and get closer to their goals to become number 1. You think you can win with just half of your strength. You haven't put a single scratch on me, you know. Izuku clenches the broken fingers on his right hand before looking at Todoroki with a determined expression, much to the horror of the audience and even present Mike. Come at me with everything you've got. Itsuka didn't know what Izuku was saying, but he looked pretty fired up. Seeing him hurt himself to this level was just worrying to a whole new extent. What is he doing? Why is he going this far? What drives him to show this to himself? Itsuka's angry expression turns into a more concerned one. Izuku, Midoriya, just who are you? Meanwhile, Todoroki looks even angrier than before. Midoriya, what did you just say? Everything I've got. Did my bastard old man buy you off or something? You don't know what you're talking about. Now I really am pissed. Todoroki charges at Izuku again, although it's clear for everyone that his movements are much slower. Todoroki jumps towards Izuku, but he was already prepared. Imagine the egg again. Come on, it won't explode. You got this. Izuku charges up One for All in his right arm and punches Todoroki in the stomach, sending him back. The audience goes wild and present Mike comments with renewed energy. He got a hit on Todoroki. Aizawa's gaze softens. He remembers what he told Izuku on the very first day of school. The kid still had a long way to go, but his control over his quirk was definitely better. He isn't just fighting recklessly because he wants to. Izuku is fighting in any way he can with the control he had over his quirk in this point of time. Todoroki and Izuku charge at each other again, with Izuku launching even more attacks from his broken fingers. His left arm's muscles still hurt from the previous challenge, and it was painful to lift up, but Izuku was so full of adrenaline that he hardly noticed the pain and he kept breaking his fingers to shove Todoroki away. The pros were starting to get worried. Cementos speaks to Midnight through her earpiece. Midnight, we might have to stop this match if this keeps up. That Midoriya boy might think that Recovery Girl will heal him after this. So he is probably not too worried, but at the rate he's going right now he might sustain permanent injuries. Plus, even if he wins, he might not be in good enough shape to continue fighting on the next round. Midnight nods from the arena and keeps watching the fight with a serious expression. Izuku groaned when he found himself unable to make a fist. Izuku resorted to placing his thumb on his inner cheek like he did when he was a kid. Todoroki was sent back yet again when Izuku released his thumb. Izuku replied through multiple pants and groans. Because I want to be able to make people smile, I want to be a hero. Todoroki freezes in place for a moment. A flashback from his childhood he had forgotten about passed through his eyes. One that featured him sitting on the couch with his mother, and one that made him unaware of the incoming Izuku, who headbutted him and sent him back, snapping him out of his thoughts abruptly. Todoroki, I don't know or care about your circumstances or resolve. My motivation might even be silly compared to yours, but you have no right to become number one if you won't give it your all. Stop messing around and come at me with everything you've got. Todoroki felt a pang of nostalgia creep up on him as Izuku said those words. His mind started to drift off to places in the past he wanted to leave behind, memories of himself being hit by his father in order to train him since he was a kid, memories of him being separated from his siblings because of his father, memories of his mother being hit in front of him, the memory of his mother dumping boiling water on his face due to her trauma. It was hard for Todoroki to focus on the match with these thoughts coursing through his mind. Izuku charged up one for all in his left arm before punching Todoroki. It wasn't nearly enough to seriously injure the half-and-half user or himself, but Todoroki was sent back either way. That's why LL win this. LL surpass you. Todoroki grunted before getting up tiredly. I will not use my old man's quirk. Izuku screamed at Todoroki at the top of his lungs. It's yours. Your quirk, not his. As soon as those words left Izuku's lips, Todoroki's mind drifted to a memory he thought he had forgotten because of so much darkness in his past being brought on by his father. A memory of himself sitting on the couch with his mother, back when everything was peaceful. All Might was giving an interview, and Shoto looked on in awe and amazement. Of course, quirks are more often than not inherited by one's parents, but the really important thing is not that connection. Recognizing your flesh and blood, recognizing yourself. We are more than the quirks we were born with, and we must learn that we aren't what our bodies tell us that we are. We are ourselves, and no one can take that away from us. That's what I mean when I say, I am here. Shoto smiled brightly at the TV, and his mother noticed it, rubbing his head lovingly. You want to be a hero too, don't you? You're not a prisoner of your own blood, Shoto. It's okay for you to become who you want to be. I can't believe how much I'd forgotten. Todoroki felt like tearing up, but any tears that might have formed on his eyes were immediately dried out when Todoroki bursted into flames, much to everyone's surprise. Todoroki's classmates were stunned. He's using his fire. All Might and Itsuka looked on in amazement. Itsuka's gaze turned into a surprised one. Midoriya, did he do all of this for Todoroki? All Might furrowed his eyebrows. Young Midoriya, don't tell me you were trying to save young Todoroki all along. Izuku had to cover his eyes for a moment, but the sound of Todoroki's voice made him look at Todoroki with a surprised expression. Now which one of us is screwing around, helping your enemy like that? Todoroki emerged from the fire wearing a grin on his face. I want to be a hero too. Izuku smiles proudly, an action that's also shared by Endeavor, who grins and suddenly shouts, Yes, SHOTO. Everyone looks at Endeavor, who is walking down from the bleachers with a smirk. Have you finally come to your senses? Yes, very good. With my blood, you will surpass me and live up to the reason I created you. Present Mike rubs his head sheepishly, and Endeavor suddenly shouts encouragement for his son. Such a doting, loving, and supportive father. Izuku's smile vanishes when he sees Todoroki heat up his flames. Why are you smiling? With those injuries, in this situation you're crazy, Midoriya. Don't blame me for what happens next. Todoroki stomps the ground and charges up one final attack, with Izuku doing the same. Cementos places his hands on the concrete below the arena and uses his quirk to try to block the two boys away from each other with concrete walls. Midnight, we have to stop this or they'll kill each other. Midnight tears the sleeves on her outfit and aims for the boys. THS boy's body won't hold up. Todoroki sends out one last barrage of ice bigger than any of his previous attacks, and Izuku jumps over it with the power of one for all. That's it, gotta get close and hit him with everything I've got. Todoroki heats up even more, and the ice around him melts in under a second as Izuku extends the palm of his hand towards him. Todoroki raises his arm while speaking in a low, yet sincere tone. Midoriya, thanks. Itsuka can't stand this anymore. She quickly gets up from her seat and shouts to the top of her lungs, an action that doesn't go unnoticed by her classmate. Midoriya, you idiot. What are you doing? Get out of th. Itsuka's sentence is cut short when Shoto uses his firepower to ignite the cold generated by his wave of ice to create a huge wind blast which, along with Izuku's wind pressure attack, creates a huge shock wave which blasts both of them back and destroys Cementos' cement wall in the process. The blast is felt all across the arena, with many people from the audience having to cover their eyes due to the sheer number of dust particles in the air. "What's happening down there?" shouts Momo, who is covering her eyes. "Dude, this is insane," shouts Kaminari, who is clinging to his seat. "What the heck is up with Class A?" shouts Monoma from his seat, with Pony clutching onto him with all her strength to not be blown away. When the wind calms down, the pros who were at ground level get up and rub their backs in pain. Cementos looks at the arena in awe. Just because something is powerful doesn't mean it's good, but man, these two are good. Midnight gets up and rubs her back before looking at the arena, with the audience following after her. She spots someone standing outside the arena. Everyone's hearts stop for a solid second before the smoke clears, revealing the identity of the boy out of bounds. It's Izuku. He slumps over before collapsing entirely on the floor. On the other hand, Toroki is standing on the arena with a pensive expression, panting heavily, yet at a calmer rate than when he was fighting Izuku. Midnight raises her arm. Midoriya is out of bounds. Todoroki moves on to the semi-finals. The audience cheers loudly for Todoroki. On her part, Itsuka was now absolutely blown away. She watched as Midoriya was being carried away by the medical staff to the infirmary again. But her mind couldn't stop repeating the images of him fighting Todoroki. The way he broke his own body multiple times, the way he stumbled all over the arena, the way he was barely holding himself together. Izuku definitely lost, but it didn't feel that way to her. He managed to get Todoroki to use his fire, after all. It was then that Itsuka decided that enough was enough. Everything she'd learned about this Izuku Midoriya boy was surprising, confusing, contradicting, and more on so many levels, but what she definitely knew was that he was someone exceptional, and she needed to know why. Itsuka got up from her seat and walked towards the infirmary in hopes of getting to talk with him again. Itsuka's classmates noticed this too, but decided to not disturb her since they were still recovering from the intense match themselves. Itsuka spent most of the way towards the infirmary muttering to herself. What would she say to him? What did she plan on knowing? What on earth was she supposed to say to not appear so obvious or intruding? She walked at a very slow pace to answer these questions, and yet she didn't know the answer to them. Perhaps it was best to just let things flow naturally, she thought. As she finally got the courage to approach the infirmary, she heard some voices coming from inside. They sounded concerned and startled. "Surgery," was all she could hear from inside. The voices gradually became louder until they were pushed out of the room. "But surgery is kinda a big deal, isn't it? Will his injuries be completely healed?" Itsuka raised her eyebrows in surprise when she saw 4 of Izuku's classmates being pushed out of the room by Recovery Girl. If she remembered their names correctly, they were Tenya Ida, Tsuyu Asui, Minoru Minta, and Ochako Uraraka. They looked pretty concerned about Izuku, but they were forced to let him rest. The 4 students sighed in resignation before walking towards their seats once again. At the sight of Itsuka, Ida decided to greet his classmate. "Greetings. If I'm not mistaken, you are Itsuka Kendo, the president of Class B, correct?" Itsuka giggles awkwardly. "Why, yeah, that's me. Say, was Midoriya in there just now?" Ida crosses his arms and looks down. "Unfortunately, yes. We were instructed to leave the room for Recovery Girl to perform surgery on him." Itsuka raises her eyebrows and steps back for a moment. "What? Surgery? Is he really that badly injured?" Sue steps forward. "Well, she said that she needed to extract the small fragments of bone that could be stuck in his joints." Itsuka looks away. "Geez, I didn't think it was that bad." Ida smiles softly. "I don't think we should worry. Midoriya is a lot stronger than he looks. As his friend and fellow classmate, I have utmost faith in him and I know he'll pull through this." Itsuka giggles at how formal Ida is, even in moments like these. "You got that right, he's lucky to have friends that look out for him like you." Tsuyu smiles. "You shouldn't forget about yourself, Itsuka-chan. You were also coming to check on him, weren't you?" Itsuka blushes before crossing her arms. Well, I guess so. I mean, I met him not too long ago, but I can tell he's someone kind and sweet. I'd hate for something bad to happen to innocent people like him." Tsuyu giggles before walking past Itsuka. "Well, we're going back to our seats. The stage suffered a lot of damage, so they're taking a break to repair it. But it'll be fun to talk with everyone else about this, right?" Ida nods. "Agree. This is a learning experience like no other, although I have to remind everyone to not go to the lengths Midoriya went to." Itsuka smiles and rolls her eyes at Ida's attitude. At first she thought the guy was a jerk like Bakugo, but in reality he was just pretty serious about school in general. At least she was happy about the previous challenge, bringing their classes together to some extent. She was getting to know more about Class A, and they didn't seem nearly enough of a bunch of jerks as Monoma made them sound like. They were actually pretty nice and interesting people, and Itsuka found herself wanting to know more about them. Itsuka smiles to herself as she walks alongside Ida and Tsuyu back to their seats. The only ones that hadn't said anything through it all were Uraraka and Mainta. Mainta had been too busy staring at Itsuka's legs to care about what she had to say. But Uraraka was a different case. It was this feeling again. She didn't know why, but seeing Kendo worried about Midoriya felt off to her for some reason. Uraraka thought about ignoring this feeling again. But it was harder due to her not being used to feeling like this 2 times in a row, and for a boy of all things. Uraraka sighed before walking alongside the rest of the group, hoping that she could sort out her feelings soon. 30 minutes later, the arena was about to be fixed and the next set of matches would start soon. The students of Class NB took advantage of this time to get to know each other a bit more. They weren't friends yet, but the tension between classes had diminished somewhat. Itsuka was currently speaking to Momo Yaoyorozu, talking about the agencies they'd like to join, the matches they'd witnessed so far in the former events. Suddenly, a green-haired boy makes his entrance from the top of the bleachers. Izuku has a cast around his right leg and left arm, but he is still smiling as usual. Uraraka turns around and looks at him worryingly. Deku, is your surgery done already? Izuku giggles. Yup, recovery girl has magical hands. Uraraka raises an eyebrow in concern. Shouldn't you be resting? Izuku shakes his head. Maybe, but I wanted to watch properly. Everyone's efforts to be number 1, they're all so inspiring. I almost feel like I'm getting stronger just by watching them. Uraraka smiles softly at Izuku. The way he spoke about his friends and classmates was one that infatuated her in secret. Midoriya. Izuku turned around to the mention of his name, and he saw a very serious-looking Itsuka, who had moved away from Yaoyorozu and was now at the top of the bleachers. We need to talk. Don't worry, I'll be quick. Izuku nodded nervously. Why yes, Kendo. Izuku got up from his seat and followed Itsuka, who was taking him to an area in which no one would hear them. Uraraka looked on, trying to ignore the sinking sensation she felt in her stomach. Once they were alone, Itsuka looked at Izuku with a small glare and crossed her arms. So I told you to not get hurt and you didn't listen. Izuku cringed at Itsuka's words. He knew he had promised her to be more careful, and he blew it away. Why yes I did, sorry, Kendo. Itsuka nods. And not only that, but you had to get surgery to not get any permanent damage on your joints, is that correct? Izuku felt himself cringe even more. Why yes. Itsuka sighs. You know I'm not mad at you, but I'm a bit disappointed. I really thought you could take care of yourself a bit more. I guess I just wanted to talk to you to tell you that I don't understand you, Midoriya. I don't understand why you did all of that. I don't understand what drove you to break your body so much. I don't understand what you wanted to achieve. Izuku also sighs and looks at Itsuka with a sad expression. I know I'm sorry, Kendo, but Izuku's sad expression falls for a bit. I don't think I would have done things any differently. Itsuka raises her eyebrows and uncrosses her arms in surprise. Wait, what did you say? Izuku flinches a bit before looking at Itsuka with absolute conviction in his eyes. I said I wouldn't have done things differently. Itsuka's serious expression turns into a slightly angry one. But why? You could have seriously injured yourself out there. Hell, you probably would have died. Izuku sighs. I know, but I saw someone who needed help, and I couldn't just stay still. Itsuka's anger is replaced by some confusion and a hint of sadness can be seen in her eyes. Explain yourself, mister. Ever since I met him, Todoroki always stuck out to me as someone who thought too highly of himself. Everyone knew he was the son of Endeavor, and yet, he refused to use his father's quirk. I thought he hated everyone, but I saw that, underneath the anger in his eyes, there was some sadness and grief deep in his soul. I don't know what happened to him to make him the way he is today, but it must have been bad. Itsuka raises an eyebrow again. So you did all of this to yourself for him, then? Izuku grabs his left arm softly and looks down in thought. I know I could have died, I know I could have ignored it, I know my motivation might seem silly to everyone, but I've always wanted to be a hero who can save everyone. And a hero's duty is essentially to meddle where you're not called. I saw someone who needed saving, and I couldn't bring myself to let him suffer anymore. Itsuka's gaze softens at his words, and she tries to contain herself from becoming too emotional as he continues to speak. Plus, I meant every word I said to Todoroki. Everyone is giving it their all here, and he had no right to become number 1 if he wasn't gonna use his full strength. Todoroki's heart was sealed in some darkness brought by his past, and it was preventing him from using his left side. I'm glad I could convince him to use his fire, but that was his choice in the end. All I did was convince him that his quirk was his and no one else's. I wouldn't have done things any differently, because I saved Todoroki from himself. Itsuka felt moved by his words. She still didn't know much about him, but he was just a really sweet and kind person in general. Itsuka couldn't help but feel a pang of happiness at Izuku's motivations to become a hero. He was noble, brave, determined, and resilient, all qualities she admired. Izuku almost jolted in surprise when he felt Itsuka wrap her arms around him softly. Kk Kendo. Itsuka chuckles before letting go of Izuku. You sure are a frustrating person, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku giggles awkwardly and rubs the back of his head sheepishly. I am. Itsuka smiles. Yeah, I told you not to hurt yourself and you showed everyone what you're made of instead. Can't say I'm surprised, though. Based on everything I've learned about you, I can tell you've always been one tough cookie. I'm guessing you've got a heart too brave and loyal for your own good sometimes. But dang, you took it too far this time. Itsuka places her hand on Izuku's cast while smiling softly. Izuku laughs softly and he feels his cheeks heating up. Heh, I guess that's just how I am. Maybe, kinda, sorta. Itsuka's smile widens. Just take it easy, okay? I'm here now. Besides, I bet no one's gonna bother you again. Not after that match. Though maybe next time, maybe check with your pal Itsuka first before going all Rambo on him. Itsuka chuckles. Izuku chuckles too in response. Thanks, Kendo, but you don't have to do this. I'm fine now. Itsuka smiles before taking out a pen. Nope, too bad for you, tough guy. From here on out you'll have to answer to me whenever you get hurt, you hear me? Plus, I got a way to make sure you behave. Izuku watches as Itsuka writes something on his cast. Kendo, what are you doing? Itsuka chuckles as she stops writing. I'm giving you my number, of course. Izuku looks at the cast on his arm and realizes that it's indeed her phone number. It's a bit small and located in an awkward part of his cast, probably due to Itsuka wanting no one to know about it. Are you sure about this, Kendo? Itsuka nods. Yup. And one more thing, our classes seem to be getting along, so we'll probably meet again. I want to get to know you a bit better, and since we'll see each other again, you might as well call me Itsuka. Izuku blushes furiously. Oh, are you serious? Itsuka nods while chuckling. Well, I gotta get back to my seat to make sure Monoma isn't causing fights again. See you around, tough guy. Itsuka ruffles Izuku's hair before walking away. Izuku is left dumbfounded for a moment. He has a lot of questions in his mind, but a voice in his head takes the lead. OMIGOSH. A girl gave me her number. It had been a few days since the sports festival had finished, and everyone's lives had become a lot more interesting since then. People across the streets now recognized many students from both Class A and Class B alike, which surprised even Kendo herself. Most people were ecstatic to meet the participants of the last two events, although not everyone was happy. There was still a part of the public who stared at the students with pensive expressions, almost as if they were judging them silently. Itsuka noticed this, and she attributed it to the conversation between Izuku and the supposed All Might she'd overheard before the battle tournament. However, Itsuka didn't pay much attention to the people who stared at her since she was still processing everything that had happened after the sports festival. Many pros took notice of the students who had given it their all during the event, but most of the offerings had gone to the 8 students who managed to enter the battle tournament, and even more so to Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki of all students. Itsuka did get a decent number of nominations, but she still felt somewhat disappointed with herself for not being able to advance in the sports festival as much as she would have wanted. Nevertheless, Itsuka decided to accept one such offer coming from the snake hero Iwabami, and much to her surprise, Momo Yaoyorozu had done the same. Itsuka really hoped to experience what it was like to be a pro at work during her internship with Iwabami. But all that came out of that was a long time in the waiting room waiting for Iwabami to be done with her photo shoots, not to mention the embarrassing demo advertisement she filmed along with Yaoyorozu. Itsuka didn't mind being in a commercial for hair products, but it wasn't really her thing. Either way, her internship with Iwabami had passed as quickly as it had come, and soon enough it was time for her to go home. Itsuka found herself thinking about her friends and classmates on the way back. And in particular, she thought about Izuku Midoriya. She felt sorry for him. The poor guy had no nominations whatsoever, and she couldn't really blame the pros for not taking him. After all, that match he had with Todoroki was the most stress-inducing thing she had ever witnessed. The way he had broken his fingers repeatedly while shouting at Todoroki was a sight she'll never forget, even if his intentions were genuine. The pros seemed to share this train of thoughts, since no one wanted a kid with a self-destructive quirk on their team, resulting in him not having a single internship offer. Still, she felt like she had to talk to him now that her life seemed to be calming down. She quickly took out her phone and dialed Izuku's number. They hadn't really spoken in the sports festival's following days, but she felt like she should really start the conversation. After all, if he hadn't gotten any internships whatsoever, then he would probably be sitting at home feeling miserable. Itsuka snapped out of her train of thoughts when Izuku answered. Hello, Izuku. Kendo. Is that you? How are you? Itsuka could picture Izuku blushing through the phone. The way he turns into a nervous stuttering mess was adorable. It was truly a big contrast to the way he could act when he was serious. I told you to call me Itsuka, Izuku, and I'm fine, but what about you? Itsuka could hear him chuckling nervously through the phone. I am good, just resting from my internship. Itsuka raises an eyebrow in surprise. Huh, you got an internship offer. But I heard from Yaoyorozu that you didn't get any. Izuku chuckles nervously again. Heh, well, I got one at Hasu after everyone got theirs. It's honestly kind of a long story and I don't want to keep you on the phone for long, Ken. Itsuka giggles. I don't mind, Izuku. It's 1 o'clock. I'm on the train and I have nothing to do. They turned the TVs in front of our seats on and there's nothing interesting to watch anyway. Just some boring romance movie. Izuku laughs for a moment. Well, have you checked if there's anything else? Itsuka starts checking the other channels. I don't know. I'm so bored I might just resort to watching the news. My internship was pretty boring, but I didn't have time to do stuff for myself either way. Izuku laughs again. Well, I'm sure you still got a chance to learn from an important pro hero, right? Itsuka rolls her eyes with a smirk at the reminder of her internship with Uobami and the cringy commercial they had to film. Huh, as if. You wouldn't believe me if I told you that. Itsuka's eyes widen in surprise when she reaches the news. The TV displays the aftershock of a pretty serious-looking incident in the city of Hasu, with fires spreading across some blocks, some hideous-looking creatures being arrested and even killed on camera, and the involvement of the number 2 hero Endeavor of all people. But what really surprised Itsuka was the mention of Izuku and 2 of his classmates at a supposed incident with the hero killer himself. What the? Izuku notices the concern in Itsuka's voice. Itsuka, what's wrong? Izuku, what is? Itsuka, what's wrong? Did something happen? It's the news, you're on the news. Izuku cringes at that. He really didn't want Itsuka to find out about that, but it was bound to happen due to the stain incident being a huge scandal. Well, wait, they're saying that you ran into the hero killer himself, Izuku, is that correct? Izuku tries to think of an excuse, but he proves to be too slow for Itsuka's quick deduction skills. And didn't you say that your internship was at Hasu? Izuku falls silent for a second. Well, yes, but Itsuka's tone becomes a bit demanding. Izuku, I want the truth, and I want it now. Izuku stammers. But I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it. Itsuka's tone becomes firm. Doesn't matter. We're on the phone. Izuku sighs. I don't think we can talk about it anyways. Itsuka, it's pretty big stuff. Itsuka scoffs. Big stuff my ass. Just tell me already. You can't just leave me hanging like this. Izuku thinks for a moment. Well, maybe we can meet up at a certain place to talk about it. Itsuka sighs. Fine, where do you want to meet up and when? Izuku thinks for a moment. Is Twinkle Park at 5 o'clock okay for you? Itsuka raises an eyebrow again. The big one in the northern districts of Musutafu. Yes, all right. I should be able to be there in time. Great, I'll see you there. See ya. Izuku hangs up first. Itsuka groans before leaning back on her seat. Why the hell was everything surrounding this guy so strange, weird, out of place, surprising and wrong? If she had a nickel for every time Izuku managed to surprise her well, she wouldn't know what to do with so much money. She didn't know why, but every time something big happened, Izuku was at the center of it. She had wanted to talk to him in private numerous times throughout the sports festival, but she was always cut short or distracted by something else. Well, that ended today. Enough was enough with secrets from him. It was time to really get to know him. The afternoon had passed quickly for Itsuka. She had gone home, locked her hero outfit in her room, changed into a comfortable pair of shorts along with a black jacket, and combed herself before going out to the northern parts of Musutafu. She'd come here on certain occasions on her own when she was a kid. It was a pretty big park with a big number of people, and it wasn't far from her old house. So it was a safe place for her to play after school had ended on those happier, less stressful days of her childhood. Itsuka was standing by the side of a tree by not too far from the entrance to the park, taking in the scenery. Her family had to move away when she started middle school due to her wanting to specialize in martial arts, so it had been quite some time since she last saw the park. It wasn't much different from the last time she came, though. Sure, there were some less trees and more monuments and locals, but she attributed it to some hero and villain encounters in that place causing some destruction in the park. Itsuka sighed to herself as she took in every last detail about the park. Even if there were some minor changes done to it, it still felt like home. She just wished she could know why this park sparked a particular memory of hers, which had been blurred out due to time's passing. The fading memory was snatched out of her mind when she heard her name being called from behind her. Ken Itsuka. Itsuka turned around to see the green-haired boy himself approaching her with a smile. He seemed to be dressed nicely enough for a visit to the park. Although Itsuka noticed the strain on his walk, particularly, Izuku seemed to be putting more effort on one leg. It was as if he couldn't walk properly due to some wound. Izuku greets Itsuka with a nervous smile. Hey, Itsuka. Itsuka chuckles. Hey, Izuku, I'm guessing that's also from your so-called Hasu internship, right? Says Itsuka while looking at Izuku's leg with a concerned expression. Izuku sighs. Yeah, it is. Itsuka looks around and spots a bench not too far away from them. Let's sit. I don't want you tiring yourself out. Izuku accepts the offer and the couple sit on the bench in silence for some moments, with neither of them knowing how to get the conversation started. Izuku looks down and decides to speak first. So Itsuka, I guess you wanted to see me because this matters to you, right? Itsuka looks at Izuku with an awkward yet worried expression. Well, obviously. Izuku sighs before looking away while rubbing the back of his head in shame. Sorry for worrying you, Itsuka, I didn't want to get hurt again, but things just happened, you know. Itsuka groans in slight annoyance. Of course things just happen every time you get involved. Izuku looks at Itsuka with a confused expression. What do you mean, Itsuka? Itsuka looks at Izuku with an exasperated yet worried expression. Well, everything. First, you and your class somehow survived an actual villain attack at the USJ having had no training whatsoever to deal with those kinds of situations. Second, you somehow get to train with All Might of all heroes because your quirk is similar to his. Third, you somehow got into UA even when your quirk manifested a few hours before the entrance exam. I could go on, but I think you get my point. Izuku felt himself cringe at Itsuka's words. They were all valid reasons for her to be skeptic, surprised and even frustrated with him. But he knew he couldn't tell her the truth right. I don't know what to say, Itsuka. Itsuka places her hand on Izuku's shoulder and looks at him with pleading eyes. Izuku, look, I'm not saying all of this to be rude, I swear. I'm just worried and frustrated. There's a lot going on with you that I don't understand, but I want to. Still, the fact that I feel like there's a lot of stuff you hide from me doesn't help. I just want to understand. Izuku looks at the floor again. Itsuka, I know there's a lot of stuff I don't tell you, but I also don't tell anyone else about this because my life is a bit of a mess. I don't want to make anyone worry about me. Itsuka sighs and looks at Izuku with a soft gaze. Izuku, do you remember what I told you at the sports festival? Izuku looks away from Itsuka. You said I'd have to check with you before going all out, and you said I'd have to answer to you if I got hurt again. Itsuka nods slowly. Darn straight. You got hurt, Izuku. You have to answer to me now. Izuku keeps looking away from Itsuka, not daring to make eye contact with her. He felt really ashamed of himself, getting hurt when she told him not to yet again. But the situation with the hero killer was quite unique. Plus, it was something the police told him not to tell anyone about. Itsuka's gaze softens even more. Please, you can't just leave me in the dark. Izuku's thoughts run wild. On the one hand, he wanted to spill the beans and tell her about his run-in with the hero killer, but on the other he knew he'd be going against the police's wishes. Then a thought popped into his head. Kenji Tsurugami, the chief of police that looked okay a dog, said nothing about telling one of his friends about it. Plus, the way he had put it, they were forced to remain silent as to not let the general public know that 3 kids who had no hero licenses took down the hero killer. But that wouldn't happen if Itsuka said nothing. Although, a pang of doubt hit Izuku's heart, brought upon by his past, his fears and his insecurities. Was he really so weak to the point of wanting someone else to confide in? It almost felt selfish of him to want to tell Itsuka this. All Might seemed to handle everything well enough on his own. And if he couldn't follow in All Might's footsteps properly, how could he call himself a hero who could save everyone? There were so many insecurities coursing through Izuku's mind. He knew he should stay quiet. And yet he wanted to confide in Itsuka. Was it selfish of him to want this kind of comfort? Did it make him weak? Would he regret it later? Izuku speaks, still looking away from her. Itsuka, can I trust you? Itsuka raises her eyebrows, surprised at the sudden question. However, she quickly composes herself. Izuku, look at me. Izuku does as told slowly. And when he gets a good look at her, all he sees is genuine honesty and sympathy in her face. Itsuka smiles softly at Izuku while rubbing his shoulder lightly. I wouldn't be here if you couldn't trust me, silly. The whole reason I'm here is because I care, you dork. Itsuka giggles softly, a gesture that is mirrored by Izuku, who feels his defenses crumble slowly but surely. Well, can you keep a secret? Itsuka's smile widens. Of course. Izuku looks at her with a concerned expression. No, I mean a really serious secret. Can you keep a pretty important secret, Itsuka? Itsuka is a bit taken back by his serious demeanor, but she knows he might just be doing it to assure himself that he could trust her. Itsuka decides to keep smiling warmly at him to get him to trust her once and for all. I swear on my heart that I can keep a secret for you, Izuku. Izuku sighs before looking down. This was it. There was no backing down now. Alright, well, it's a bit hard to define where it all began, but I'm pretty sure the whole Hasu incident thing began on the sports festival. Itsuka withdraws her hand from Izuku's shoulder and stares at him with a curious expression in silence, eager to know the whole story. You see, Ida got a phone call after his match with Takoyami, and he went away to answer it. When he came back, he seemed off. He didn't give us a very detailed explanation, but all he said was that there was an emergency that required his immediate attention. Ada left the sports festival shortly afterwards. I thought the whole thing would end there, but I was wrong, oh so wrong. Itsuka saw Izuku's expression fall, but she remained silent. After the sports festival ended, We all saw that Ida got a lot of nominations from many heroes to do internships with, but we were all surprised when he chose to intern in the Hasu City Hero office when he got better nominations. We said our goodbyes to each other on the train station, but Ida seemed off. As his friend, I still feel disappointed in myself for not noticing that he wasn't well. Itsuka noticed that Izuku's expression darkened, but she chose to stay silent since he was already opening up to her. Turns out the hero killer's last victim was Ida's older brother, and he was left without the capacity to use his legs for the rest of his life. The last sighting of the hero killer was in Hasu, so Ida went there to kill the hero killer in order to get revenge in the name of his older brother. Itsuka tried to not seem shocked, but her face betrayed her feelings. She didn't expect Ida of all people to do something like that. Judging by their interaction on the sports festival, he seemed like a very formal and down-to-earth person. So the fact that he had gone by himself to Hasu with the sole purpose of killing the hero killer was astounding to say the least. Although, there was a small part of her mind that felt pity for Ida. To have a member of your own family stuck on a wheelchair permanently because of some psychopath's twisted ideals, she didn't know what she would have done if she was in Ida's shoes. But she could definitely tell that she would have been just as enraged as Ida, if not more. At the time I was passing by bullet train through Hasu with the hero I interned with, but the train was attacked by a creature similar to the one that attacked the USJ. I left the train to help take down the creature that attacked us and hopefully save as many people as possible. But all I saw outside was Hasu ablaze. I wondered why Ida wasn't helping. But then I figured out the real reason he came to Hasu in the first place. I went on the search for Ida, and I found him on an alley about to be killed by the hero killer himself. Itsuka is even more surprised by this new information. Creatures similar to the ones at the USJ attack. Whoever created them must be the real deal themselves, not to mention how lucky it was for Izuku's train to be attacked right as he was passing through Hasu. Also, who did he intern with? I attacked the hero killer, and later Todoroki joined us since he was patrolling the neighborhood with Endeavor and his agents. It had been close several times, but Ida, Todoroki, and I managed to defeat the hero killer, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Izuku Midoriya was definitely one hell of an individual. The guy seemed to barely have any control of his quirk the last time she saw him, and now he had somehow managed to defeat the hero killer. How? Thought Itsuka to herself with wide eyes. She really wanted to interrupt Izuku to ask him how he did it, but she decided it would be best to let him finish his story. Eventually, Endeavor arrived and we were all taken to the hospital. The chief of police told us to keep all of this a secret and have Endeavor take the credit for capturing the hero killer. We accepted and the chief bowed before leaving. Itsuka felt a bit angry at this. What, did the police just expect them to stay still as the hero killer murdered Ida? Although, Itsuka wasn't stupid. She knew that there were well-thought-out laws that forbid people with no hero licenses from using their quirks to enact justice by their own hand, since it could end up in vigilantism. Still, she felt a bit frustrated that Izuku, Todoroki, and Ida wouldn't get even a slight taste of recognition for their achievement. Izuku finally lifted his gaze to look at Itsuka now that he was done recapitulating the events that had transpired during his internship. I guess that's everything that was important. Izuku almost jolted in surprise when he saw Itsuka close to his face staring at him slack-jawed, buggy-eyed. Are you okay, Itsuka? Itsuka snapped out of her trance and shook her head before looking at Izuku with a more calmed, yet still surprised expression. I guess I just wow. You really did all of that, Izuku. That was incredible. I don't know how you do it, but you just keep exceeding my expectations every time I see you, tough guy. Itsuka giggles before ruffling Izuku's hair, causing him to blush and look away. It really wasn't much. Itsuka's expression softens. You know, I had a feeling you bumped into the hero killer in some sort of attempt to save someone. Always putting yourself in harm's way to protect others, you big lug. Izuku chuckles while blushing madly. I guess that's something about me that really frustrates you, huh? Itsuka smiles softly while placing her hand on top of his. I'm glad you got Ida out of that situation safely. But honestly, you scared me half to death when I saw you in the news. I know you have this need to save others, but you should really tone it down sometimes, Izuku. Izuku lets out a small sigh. Yeah, lots of people have told me that before, but I never listen. I've always wanted to be a hero that saves everyone, like All Might. I don't care if people just don't believe in me. I'll get there if I just try my best. I know it. Itsuka's expression turns into a concerned yet elated pout. I know that, Izuku. You've told me that before. I never said I doubted you. I just meant to say that I worry for you. Besides, ever since I met you, you've been nothing but self-sacrificing. I don't like seeing kind-hearted people like you getting hurt. In fact, I hate it. If it were up to me, I'd encase you in a bubble and never let you get hurt again. But all I can do for now is try to understand you or be there for you when you need it. Izuku looks at Itsuka with a surprised expression for a moment. His surprise turns into a small smile. Thanks, Itsuka, but you really don't need to do this. I don't want to drag you to my messes or anything. Izuku almost jumps out of the bench when he feels Itsuka give him a small peck on the cheek. Itsuka giggles at his nervous reaction before smiling warmly at him. What if I want to be dragged to your mess, HM? Izuku's brain malfunctions for a second. Aye. Itsuka chuckles before ruffling his hair again, snapping him out of his trance. In all seriousness, though, you can always come to me if you want to vent or let things out. Oh, and don't worry about the whole hero killer incident. I won't say anything to anyone, promise. Izuku looks at Itsuka with a grateful smile. Do you really mean that? Itsuka wraps her arm around Izuku's shoulder and smiles widely. I honestly do. Izuku was feeling a whole variety of emotions. He felt flustered at her display of affection, embarrassed at how he was behaving, guilty for not being strong enough to keep things to himself and more, but through all of that he felt happy. The trust and comfort Itsuka provided him with was not one he was used to experiencing. But he had to admit, having someone like Itsuka watching over him and letting him open up felt nice. In the bottom of his heart there was a small glint of worry about Itsuka telling more people about what he did. But judging by his interactions with her, a feeling in his heart told him that there was nothing to worry about. Itsuka seemed like a reliable and dependable person, so he trusted her fully. Izuku chuckles. You know, now I just feel silly. Itsuka raises an eyebrow. Huh, why is that, Izuku? I really should have just been honest with you. I don't know why I was so worried about telling you all of this. Ever since I met you, you've always been someone friendly and honest. Itsuka, I like that about you. Itsuka's eyes widen for a moment and her cheeks get a small red tint. Thanks, Izuku. Itsuka leans back on the bench and Izuku does the same, enjoying the remains of the afternoon sun. The couple stay on the bench for another couple of minutes in silence, although this silence was different from the one at the beginning of their conversation. Now that they had laid out their feelings to some extent, they felt more comfortable around each other. Itsuka leaned her head on Izuku's shoulder, and he didn't pull away as he was enjoying the understanding affection Itsuka provided him with. After the blissful moments pass, Itsuka looks at Izuku with a small smile. Well, this has been fun, but I gotta go. Izuku frowns a bit, already missing the warmth of her head on his shoulder. Oh really? Yeah, I promised my little brother that I'd take him to see the new All Might movie. Izuku giggles. If he's a fan, he'll love it. I heard they used real debris and rubble from his fight with the Iron Horse from 6 years ago. Itsuka chuckles. I bet you'd like him. You're both huge dorks and lovable nerds. Izuku laughs softly in embarrassment, to which Itsuka pats his head. But don't worry, Izuku. We'll definitely meet again. You still owe me the full story of how you defeated the hero killer and the hero you did your internship with, you know. Izuku smiles and gets up from the bench with Itsuka doing the same. Sounds good. Well, I guess I'll see you later, Itsuka. See you later, Izuku. Itsuka smiles and waves at Izuku before walking away. Izuku arrives at his apartment with a huge smile on his face. The meeting with Itsuka went better than he expected. Not only that, but he could tell that Itsuka was someone he could see himself bonding more with in the following days. The warmth she had provided him with, the way in which she spoke about wanting to protect him, the feeling of having someone who worried for him, it was all still new to him, but he had to admit, it felt better than nice. When Izuku opens the door, he is greeted by the sight of his mother cleaning the living room. Izuku, you're back already, honey. I thought you'd arrive later. Do you want something to eat? Izuku walks towards his room with a blissful smile on his face. No, Mom, I'm fine. Inko Midoriya looks at her son with some concern. Really? You just left without saying a word, honey? Where even were you? I was talking to a girl and it was nice, said Izuku before entering his room as if he was walking on clouds. Inko Midoriya wasn't dumb. She could put two and two together. From the way her son was acting, the way he talked and what he described he did, it was pretty obvious for her what her son was going through. Inko simply chuckled softly to herself before continuing to clean the living room, wondering how she'd have to decorate the place in case her son invited a girl over. Itsuka arrived to her house smiling to herself. There were still a lot of things she wanted to talk about with Izuku, but she felt satisfied for the moment. The guy certainly was confusing and mysterious, but he had a heart of gold she wanted to protect at all costs. She just hoped she could think of another excuse to hang out with him in private. When Itsuka opened the door, she was greeted by her little brother, who was practically behind the door waiting for her arrival to pounce on her. Itsuka gasped slightly in surprise before groaning. How many times do I have to tell you to not pounce on me, Suzu? Itsuka's little brother giggles before getting off. Itsuka, you're back, big sis. Where were you? Itsuka chuckles before walking to the bathroom. I was talking to a friend, Suzu. Itsuka's brother giggles. So you were on a date, then? Itsuka turns red at her brother's comment. Wah, no, of course not. Itsuka's brother chuckles before chanting playfully. Big sis in love. Big sis is in love. Ugh, just get dressed, Suzu. We're leaving in 5 minutes. Itsuka's blushing turned down when her little brother followed her command. Itsuka sighed before looking at the mirror of the bathroom. The way she had spoken to her brother was a bit harsher than she would have liked, but that comment had stuck with her. There was no way she would fall for someone so. When Itsuka wanted to list off the many defects of Izuku Midoriya, very little came to mind. Of course, there was his self-sacrificing attitude, his low self-esteem, but Itsuka couldn't get much farther from that. Izuku was kind, sweet, cute, noble, brave, determined when the situation required it. His physique wasn't half bad, and he wasn't some idiotic meathead who wanted to get under her panties. Holy shit, I'm falling for Izuku Midoriya. Itsuka found herself staring at her lunch tray in silence. The last weeks had been interesting, to say the least. She had spent a lot of time talking to Izuku on her spare time, through phone or face-to-face. She now knew that Izuku had done his internship with a really obscure hero named Gran Torino. The old man was mysterious, since Itsuka had tried to search for him online and found very little information about him, with the most important piece of information being some rumor that he used to teach in UA a long time ago. Still, it was intriguing to know that someone was interested in Izuku despite his total display of recklessness at the sports festival. Izuku had also told her about the recent developments he made with his quirk. Izuku had gone on and on about the way his quirk worked, but long story short, he was now capable of spreading the force of his quirk through his entire body to make himself overall stronger, faster, and more agile in a move he named Full Cowling. Itsuka didn't know about Izuku's muttering habit until she witnessed it for herself. The way he got so lost on his thoughts, the way he started to ramble, the absolute focus on his eyes, the way he used his words in an overly complicated way to describe something he could have said in a shorter sentence. Itsuka found it unsettling at first, but she didn't mind much. Everyone was different, after all. If Izuku was the kind of guy who liked to overanalyze everything, then that was just how he was. Not to mention that Itsuka had a lot of skeletons in her closet herself, and she didn't want anyone to find out about them. It would be a pretty big scandal if people knew that the president and big sister of Class B had a secret side to herself. Izuku had also told her about his entire run-in with the hero killer. Apparently, the hero killer was hellbent on killing as many fake heroes as possible in the name of a more fair society. Thus, he had allowed Izuku to live and wanted Ida to die thanks to his ideals. Thankfully, Todoroki arrived just in time to help his friends battle the hero killer. With their efforts combined, the hero killer was defeated and arrested to Endeavor's name. However, the situation didn't end there. Apparently, there were some creatures similar to the one that attacked the USJ involved in the incident, and one of them tried to kidnap Izuku before being taken down by the hero killer, who had managed to free himself but had collapsed to his wounds shortly afterwards. Seriously, what the actual hell was up with Izuku? No matter what happened, he somehow always managed to be in the middle of things. Either way, all had gone swell in the grand scheme of things, except for the fact that society was now more paranoid than before. When the hero killer Stain was arrested, his backstory and ideology went public. Itsuka knew that this would cause a chain reaction, in which people would join criminal organizations like the League of Villains hoping to follow in the hero killer's ideals, and evil would grow as a result. Itsuka felt a bit worried about this, since it brought her memories of the sports festival and the conversation between Izuku and the unknown person she overheard. If people were already on their nerves since UA was attacked, then this incident was another blow to the insurance of public peace. The public could start to turn against heroes if criminal organizations started to grow. Itsuka tried to ignore all of these thoughts and focus on the upcoming final exams, but it was pretty hard to do so when it seemed like the public expected the younglings at UA to fix everything as soon as they graduated, not to mention that she was starting to feel left behind. Itsuka sighed before turning her gaze towards Izuku, who was happily eating his lunch on a table not too far away from her own at the cafeteria. Her recent conversations with him made nothing but solidify her attraction to him. She wondered how he did it. How did he always manage to push himself past his limits? How was he always noticed by everyone? How was he already making a name for himself? So far, Izuku managed to pass the entrance exam, survived the attack at the USJ, saved Todoroki from himself at the sports festival, saved Ida's life, defeated the hero killer, and gained more control of his quirk, all in a pretty short span of time considering how much time and training he had with his quirk. Itsuka smiled softly at Izuku from afar. She had thought about telling him how she felt about him, but she had gone back on it numerous times. They were both training to become heroes, so a romantic relationship between the two could get in the way of their goals, right? Or was that just another excuse she came up with to not tell him how she felt? Itsuka shook her head and continued eating in silence. They were still just entering UA, so there was really nothing written in stone. She could wait a few days, months, years before telling him how she felt, kinda, perhaps, maybe sometime. Itsuka almost spat her food out when her classmate Setsuna elbowed her in the side with a smile. "What you looking at, Prez?" Itsuka gulped down the remaining food on her mouth before answering with a sheepish smile. "Just thinking thoughts." Setsuna looked at the direction Itsuka had been staring at and smiled. "You don't tell me you're looking at the boys." A small blush creeps into Itsuka's cheeks before she scoffs. Huh, please don't be ridiculous, said Suna, a blonde girl with horn smiles, entering the conversation. You totally weren't, though. Itsuka crosses her arms and looks away. Pony, how many times have I told you to not make assumptions? A girl with black shoulder-length, bob-shaped hair joins the conversation with a blank expression. You can't blame this on Pony's Japanese, Kendo. You were staring at the boys from Class A. Itsuka wants to facepalm at Kodai's bluntness, but she contains herself, merely letting out a groan. That may be so, Yui, but that doesn't mean Setsuna's assumptions are correct, you know. Setsuna giggles. My lizardy instincts are just that awesome, press. Itsuka looks at her friends with a somewhat annoyed yet amused expression. Well, why is the focus suddenly on me? A girl with chin-length, pale gray hair joins the conversation, still holding her hands as high as her elbows with her hands draped down like a ghost. It's because none of us could picture you staring at the spooky boys from Class A until we saw you just now, Kendo. Itsuka rolls her eyes. What is that supposed to mean? Ryuko. Setsuna smirks. It means that you're real focused on that table over there, press. You know, the one with the 3-star boys from the sports festival. Itsuka huffs. So, I know none of you like Class A, so what's it to you? The girls of Class B stare at Itsuka in silence for a moment before letting out a bit of laughter. Even Yui, who is usually void of emotions, giggles softly to herself. Itsuka stares at her classmates as if they had been replaced by aliens. Wah, what's so funny? Setsuna elbows Itsuka softly with a smile. Who said we don't like Class A, press? Itsuka's eyes widen for a moment in genuine surprise. Wait, you guys don't hate Class A? Ryuko lets out a small smile. We don't. They were spooky to approach to at first. But after the sports festival we found ourselves bonding with Class A to a degree that surprised even ourselves. Itsuka raises her eyebrows. Huh, are you serious? Setsuna giggles. Yeah, I've been gossiping with Mina Ashido and Toru Hagakure. Ryuko has been watching horror films with that bird guy. Pony has been spending time with that earphone girl to improve her Japanese and pronunciation via songs. Tetsu has been spending more time on the gym with that Kirishima guy. Ibara likes to have some relaxing tea time with Momo Yaoyorozu. Oase and Kaibara have been spending time with Minta and Kaminari doing who knows what. And even Yui has been seen spending time talking to Shoto Todoroki. Itsuka stares at her classmates in stunned silence before a fond smile forms on her lips. Wow, I didn't expect that. I have to say that the relationship between our classes took a turn that I didn't expect. I'm happy that it's a turn for the better. And you're saying this happened after the sports festival? Pony giggles. Yeah, it all started from small talk about the moves everyone used against that giant robot. And then it evolved into all of this. Itsuka chuckles. How am I finding out about this just now? The girls shrug. Yui takes a sip of her drink before talking. You're never available, Kendo. We always try to call you to spend some time with us and the rest of Class A, but you're somehow always busy at noon. Itsuka cringes internally, knowing that she always turns off her phone when she meets up with Izuku. Then, Izuku fills her thoughts. Oh god, the girls can't know about her and Izuku. Knowing Setsuna, she'd never hear the end of it. Itsuka chuckles nervously before looking away. Well, at least I'm glad you're all happy bonding with Class A. I'm proud of all of you. Pony's expression falls for a moment. Well, not everyone is happy about this. Itsuka looks back at Pony and raises an eyebrow. Oh, really? Who isn't happy about this? Yui rolls her eyes before pointing towards a blonde boy walking towards Izuku. Itsuka groans. Of course, Monoma. I should have known. Judging by the way Monoma was walking towards Izuku, something was definitely going to happen. Itsuka sighs before getting up from her seat. Don't worry, girls. I'll handle him. Itsuka walks towards Monoma from behind him, and she overhears Izuku on the way. He was talking to his classmates about the final exams. Itsuka was about to stop on her tracks to think about the final exams herself before she saw Monoma intentionally bumping into Izuku's head. Izuku yelps and turns around to see a smirking Monoma. Hey, what? Monoma's aura is so malicious it could be felt by those around him. Oh, excuse me. Your head is so big and fat it was practically impossible for me to not hit while walking innocently. Izuku looks at Monoma with an unknowing smile. What? How? Why? Monoma's smirk widens. I heard you guys met the hero killer. Izuku, Anda, and Todoroki freeze in place. While Hagakure's expression couldn't be seen, her tone carried obvious concern. Yeah, they did. Why? Monoma steps closer. Well, you must be so proud of yourselves. Classy, you're somehow in the spotlight yet again. However, I hope you realize you're only in it because you're troublemakers that always cause chaos and not because people think you're good heroes. Uraraka frowns at Monoma. Hey, that was uncalled for. What's it to you? Monoma's smirk and malicious aura intensify. Ooh, scary. Someday, the rest of us might also be caught up in the trouble you bring and become victims ourselves, you know. Of course, that might also give us a chance to prove that our class is just as capable as yours. Isn't that great? Monoma's sentence gets cut short when Itsuka chops the back of his neck. Monoma falls down and Kendo grabs his lunch tray to prevent the food from falling to the floor. Itsuka sighs, placing the lunch tray on top of a nearby trash bin before grabbing the back of Monoma's shirt, taking him off the floor. Monoma, that's not funny. Don't you know what happened to Ida? Izuku smiles sheepishly at Itsuka. Itsuka, thanks. Itsuka looks at the students from class with a smile. Sorry about that. This guy's heart is on the wrong place. That's all. Say, were you talking about the final exams? Ida looks at Kendo with a pensive expression. Indeed we were, Kendo. Kendo's smile widens. Well, in that case, I think what we'll do is fight against more robots in a battle simulation, like in the sports festival or the entrance exam. Izuku looks at Itsuka with a surprised expression. How do you know that, Itsuka? Itsuka chuckles. That's what an upperclassman told me. Izuku looks down with a thoughtful expression. Interesting. Perhaps this test will qualify our skills in battle in response to dangerous situations without the chance to be hurt severely, or maybe the teachers won't hold back. Taking into account that someone from an upper grade already went through this, we also can't disregard the possibility that the test is changed this year, because Itsuka and the rest of Izuku's classmates look at him with scared expressions as he starts to mutter again. Itsuka had already witnessed him doing this, but it didn't make it any less confusing or unsettling. Well, there he goes again, Itsuka thinks to herself. Monoma groans before looking up at Itsuka with a frustrated smile. Ugh, you are such a fool. Kendo. Itsuka looks down at Monoma and realizes that his malicious aura hasn't diminished in the slightest. We had an information advantage. You just gave away our whole strategic tactic. This was our chance to get ahead of that class full of idiots. Monoma is immediately knocked down again by another chop to the back to his neck from Itsuka, who walks away with him in one hand and the lunch tray in the other. They're not idiots, Monoma. Izuku and Ida look at Kendo's retreating form with surprised yet slightly intimidated expression. Izuku chuckles. I guess she really is like their big sister, huh? Ida nods before the group starts to eat peacefully again. Although, two people's thoughts were starting to run wild due to Izuku and Itsuka having called each other by their first names. One was Toru Hagakure, who was secretly grinning from ear to ear and was already thinking of the occasion to tell Mina about it. The other one was Ochako Uraraka, who wasn't feeling so happy herself. Uraraka sighed before getting up from her seat and walking to the girls' bathrooms silently. The rest of her friends at the table look at Uraraka with raised eyebrows. Izuku speaks in a nervous tone. Uraraka, did we say something that upset her? Did I do something? Was it because of my muttering? Tsuyu smiles at Izuku before getting up as well. Don't worry, Midoriya-chan. I'll go after her. Izuku smiles to Tsuyu as she walks after her best friend. Tsuyu finds Uraraka leaning against a wall on a lonely hallway with a thoughtful expression. Was she upset about the things Monoma said? Was she worried about the final exams? Was she just not feeling well? Tsuyu approaches Uraraka and speaks with concern evident in her voice. Ochako-chan, are you okay? Then, Uraraka snaps out of her thoughts and looks at the frog girl with a seemingly nonchalant expression. Oh, I'm fine, Tsu. Nothing to worry about. Why do you ask? Tsu frowns. Well, you left without saying anything. Uraraka smiles nervously. Well, don't worry about it, Tsu. It's nothing important. Tsuyu sighs. Ochako-chan, please don't lie to me. I hate seeing my friends suffer. Uraraka sighs and looks down. Was I that obvious? Tsuyu nods. Yes, you were. Is it about Monoma? Uraraka looks away. No, it's not about him. Tsuyu patiently waits for Uraraka to continue. Uraraka takes a breath before looking at her friend with a worried expression. Tsu, can you keep what I'm about to say a secret between us? Tsuyu nods understandingly. Of course, Ochako-chan. Uraraka looks at the floor. Well, I don't know why, but I've been feeling stirred up recently when I look at Deku-kun and Kendo. Tsuyu puts her finger to her own chin curiously. You mean Itsuka-chan from Class B, Ochako-chan? Why her of all people? And what does it have to do with Midoriya-chan? Uraraka pouts. I don't know, and that's why I hate this. See, ever since the sports festival I felt off whenever I looked at Deku and Kendo, and I don't know the reason for it. I don't like feeling like this. Tsuyu approaches Uraraka and places her hand on Uraraka's shoulder. Ochako-chan, don't you think you're just being jealous? Uraraka's eyes widen and she freezes in place. What did you say, Asui? Tsuyu repeats herself. I said you might just be feeling jealous, Ochako-chan. Uraraka blushes and puts Tsuyu's hand away while chuckling nervously. No way. I can't be jealous. Deku and I are two completely independent and free individuals that are free to see whoever we want. I can't be jealous because that would imply that I like Deku. Jealous? Nah. Tsuyu waits a moment before speaking again. Are you sure, Ochako-chan? Because you look not jealous, right? Of course. It's not like I want to spend more time with him or anything weird. I mean, sure, I think he's amazing because he tries so hard to be a hero, but it's not like I like him. He's my friend. What you're saying is way too far-fetched, Tsu. Ahaha. Tsuyu decides to not press the issue any further, although she knows that this is a conversation that needs to be had at some point. Alright, if you say so, Achako-chan. How about we go back? Midoriya-chan and Ida-chan looked pretty worried when you left without saying anything. Tsuyu walks back to the table with Uraraka following her from behind. Yeah, that sounds like a better idea. Even though Uraraka wanted to deny Tsuyu's claims, she knew deep down that Tsuyu was probably right. She met Izuku Midoriya right before the entrance exam and had spent some time with him, perhaps too much time. She had gotten to know him pretty well, and she not only liked him as a person and admired him, but he inspired her. At first she didn't expect much from a green-haired boy who could barely look at her in the eye, but life always has some interesting twists and turns in store for everyone, and had given her a little surprise with him. Uraraka got to see the side of him that not a lot of people got to see, and she grew fond of him without knowing it. From the way he always rose up to whatever challenges he faced, from the way he had saved her in the entrance exam, from the way he spoke of his classmates and friends, deep down Uraraka knew she loved him. Izuku found himself walking home after another day at school. Tsuyu had returned with Uraraka and they spent the rest of the day as if nothing had happened, although Izuku noticed that Uraraka's expression was different in a way. Izuku wondered what had happened to her. It couldn't be the stuff Monoma talked about. Uraraka wasn't some girl who broke down after a little passive-aggressive comment, and he knew it. Besides, Itsuka had appeared just in time to spare him and his friends the set of malicious comments Monoma was definitely planning on unleashing upon them. Izuku sighed fondly at the memory of Itsuka. It was a strike of luck that he got to meet her, literally. If this was life's way of getting him to meet her, he couldn't complain. Ever since he met her, she had been nothing but supportive to him. The talks he had with her after the sports festival were relaxing and comforting to say the least. He explained to her the way full cowling worked, his incident with the hero killer, his internship with Gran Torino and his drive to help Todoroki, and Itsuka had listened through it all. Even though she didn't really approve of him being so self-sacrificing, she was still willing to stay by his side. Izuku always felt a bittersweet sensation whenever he told Itsuka about his desire to save others, and she sighed in slight exasperation. He had always wanted to become a hero capable of saving everyone like All Might, but he was making Itsuka worry about him all the same. It felt sweet to have her care so much, but it also felt like a bat being swung against his head. He had received one for all, the quirk of the greatest hero, and he still got hurt whenever he used it, worrying his loved ones in the process. But then again, Itsuka wouldn't have known anything if he had just kept his mouth shut. He was the one that decided to tell Itsuka about the hero killer incident. He was the one that spilled the beans. Izuku tried to think of an explanation as to why he had told Itsuka many of his messes. Was it because he was emotionally weak? Was it because he was starved of affection or attention? Was it because he just desperately wanted someone to confide in? Or was it because Itsuka was just a really nice, honest, and sweet person? Plus, the more he tried to think about it, the more Izuku realized that he wasn't entirely right. If anything, Itsuka was the one that made the first step when she came to check on him when he got hurt at the sports festival. Perhaps it was due to her big sister-like protective attitude, but she made the first step nonetheless. Izuku felt like he was being selfish when Itsuka cared for him, but he couldn't deny the fact that she chose to stay with him. Besides, the warmth and understanding she gave him was incredibly soothing to his soul. Who could have guessed that Izuku's life would be twisted for the better after enrolling into UA? If he didn't, he wouldn't have been able to meet so many great people, Itsuka being the best example of a pleasant little surprise. However, Izuku always felt a sense of familiarity with her, as if he had seen her somewhere else before. Whether that was the case or not, spending time with her felt like home. Itsuka was beautiful, smart, strong, protective, understanding, composed, cheerful, spirited, passionate, friendly, supportive, majestic when she was in battle. That's when it hit Izuku. Oh my gosh, I'm crushing on Itsuka. 1 week later, Itsuka was waiting outside a local store located at the Kiyashi Ward shopping mall. Setsuna and Ryuko had gone in and Itsuka was just checking her phone, waiting for them to come out of there. Apparently the Forest Lodge trip the students would have to go to after the final exams were over was actually a boot training camp. Itsuka didn't mind a little extra training, but she was expecting to spend some quality relaxing time with her classmates peacefully. Still, the idea of getting extra training lessons wasn't bad, since it could help her catch back up with Izuku and the rest of his classmates who had gotten to the final event of the sports festival. This was starting to feel personal to Itsuka. Izuku was a sweet boy and seeing him so far ahead was wholesome. But it felt like a punch to her gut thinking that she could have stood out just like him if she tried a little harder. Right now wasn't the time to think about that, though. She came here with her friends to buy some of the items she'd need for the trip, and it wasn't the time or place to compare herself to others. Perhaps this little shopping spree would be the most relaxing thing they'd do in some time. So Itsuka knew she had to make the most out of this while it lasted. However, there was a slight issue at hand. Itsuka was surprised at Ryuko's fashion sense and her sudden urge to look at the window displays of many stores. Ryuko looked like a ghost most of the time, so finding out that she knew how to look stunning and had a knack for fashion was a surprise to Itsuka, a pleasant one, though. On the contrary, Itsuka didn't really care much for fashion and stuff like that. She always had been a bit different from most girls around her. Instead of looking at dresses, Itsuka was always seen staring in awe at black jackets and ripped jeans or shorts. Instead of being seen drinking soft tea like most girls, Itsuka had acquired a taste for bitter drinks since she was young, like coffee and up to more recent times, alcohol. Instead of wanting to play with dolls, Itsuka always wanted to play soccer, ride motorcycles, or watch wrestling matches on TV. Itsuka had been criticized by some people while she was growing up for not being feminine enough, whatever that meant. Itsuka didn't care, though. She knew who she was and wouldn't let others' opinions change who she was just to appease them. She was Itsuka Kendo, the future pro-hero battle fist, who would be known for building her own path with her own hands. Still, Itsuka's different tastes to most girls made situations like these pretty awkward at some points and created some disagreements and friction at times. Setsuna and Ryuko were both gushing at the latest dress display at a particular store, and Itsuka had been waiting for them for about 30 minutes. Itsuka groaned before walking away. Knowing Setsuna and Ryuko, they'd probably spend another 30 minutes in there with no problem. Itsuka looked at the many locals and stores at the mall looking for something interesting to check out, or to distract her from her boredom at the very least. That's when her gaze fixated on him. Izuku Midoriya. What the? How is he here? Thought Itsuka to herself with wide eyes. Of all people, she didn't expect him to be at the same shopping mall as her at the same time. It was then that Itsuka's gaze spread and she noticed that Izuku wasn't alone, but rather he was accompanied by Ochako Uraraka, Tsuyu Usui, Mina Ashido, Toru Hagakura, and Tenya Ida, who pretty much left Izuku and Uraraka behind. Well, might as well go and say howdy, thought Itsuka before approaching the duo. As she approached them, she almost gasped in surprise when Uraraka shouted something related to bug spray before running away from Izuku, covering her own face, leaving behind a very confused and startled Izuku. Itsuka chuckled to herself as Uraraka left. That girl was weird. Although Itsuka thought she looked adorable, still, at least Izuku was alone now. Izuku sighs before turning away from the retreating Ochako, only to be met by the sight of a smiling Itsuka who was walking towards him. Itsuka, what are you doing here? Asks Izuku in genuine surprise. Itsuka giggles and flicks Izuku's nose playfully. Guess you can't get rid of me, you big lug. Izuku chuckles and rubs the back of his head while blushing. Itsuka laughs softly before wrapping her arm around Izuku. I'm just joking, Izuku. I'm here with some friends to buy some stuff because our teachers told us that we'll be going to some training camp soon. Izuku looks at Itsuka's arm around his shoulder and smiles while looking down. How really? I'm here for the same reason, Itsuka. Itsuka raises an eyebrow while looking at Izuku with a smirk. Really? How? What are the chances, Izuku? Izuku looks at Itsuka with a smile of his own. Well, since we're here, wanna come with me and help me get what I need? Itsuka's cheeks get a small red hue, but she smiles warmly at Izuku anyway. Sure, I'd love to. Izuku chuckles. Great, but won't your friends mind? Where are they, by the way? Itsuka rolls her eyes. I left them staring at dresses at some store. Knowing them, they'll keep staring at those rags for another 2 hours or so. Wanna bet on that, Prez? Oh shit. Itsuka slowly turns around and her eyes widen in horror at the sight of Setsuna and Ryuko staring at her. Setsuna is smirking and raising her eyebrows suggestively, while Ryuko is smiling softly. Itsuka looks at Izuka and then back at her friends nervously. Hi, girls. Done so soon. Setsuna leans towards Itsuka, her smirk widening per second. Bet you're hugging him real tight, aren't you? Itsuka realizes that she still has her arm wrapped around Izuku, and she lets go with a small yelp. That was nothing, I swear. This isn't. I'm not. We're not. Izuku looks down at the floor with a blushing frown. Just how many people are in the mall today? After a moment, Itsuka huffs and walks away, dragging Setsuna with one hand and holding Ryuko's hand with the other. I'll be back, Izu Midoriya. Just gotta talk to these two for a second. Once the three girls are away from Izuku, Itsuka drops Setsuna and scoffs, crossing her arms. Ryuko looks at Itsuka with a small smile. You look like you were having fun, Kendo. Itsuka's blush returns. Ugh, did you two even get what you wanted to buy or what? Setsuna chuckles. No, you're not changing the subject on us, Prez. Not after that. Itsuka rubs her arms in a shy yet slightly annoyed manner. What's there to talk about? Nothing, that's what. Setsuna raises her eyebrows suggestively at Itsuka again. Tell me, Prez, how far have you gone with him? Itsuka is about to chop Setsuna in the neck much like she does to Monoma, but she stops herself. Setsuna, that's not what it looked like. My business with Midoriya is none of your concern. Ryuko's smile widens. Then tell us, Kendo, why did you almost call him by his first name? Itsuka looks away angrily. Well, I call you by your first names as well. Setsuna elbows Itsuka on the side. That doesn't count and you know it. Press. Ryuko speaks again. Plus, all the times you were absent while we bonded with class, it would make sense this way. Itsuka lets out a small sigh of resignation. Look, alright, you caught me. I have been meeting with him in secret for some time now, and Setsuna practically jumps from joy, interrupting Itsuka. Woo, I knew it. Itsuka chops Setsuna's neck, and her head falls down. Itsuka looks down at her friend's head with some exasperation. And nothing much has come out of that, you hear? Midoriya and I mostly just talk about school stuff, hero stuff, daily stuff, you know, the usual things you talk about with your friends. Setsuna places her head on her neck and smiles. You can't fool me, Press. I know my romance. You and him would look adorable together. You could be like the fighter team. You know, since you two are fight-focused heroes. Itsuka crosses her arms and looks away. Setsuna, ugh, even if I were to have feelings for him, there's simply no way it would work. Setsuna and Ryuko look at Itsuka with surprised and confused expressions. Huh, why? Itsuka sighs and looks down, rubbing the back of her head as if she was ashamed. We're all heroes in training, doing everything we can to achieve our goals. A relationship would get in the way of that, not to mention all the complications of a relationship. Setsuna's gaze softens and she places her hand on Itsuka's shoulder softly. Prez, can I be honest with you? Itsuka looks at Setsuna with a sad expression. Yes. Setsuna suddenly looks at Itsuka with a deadpan expression. What, did Ada put a stick up yours or something? Itsuka's expression turns into a glare. Setsuna, I swear to God I'll. Ryuko steps in between the two girls to prevent Itsuka from lashing out. Even if I don't agree on the terms she put it in, I agree with Setsuna, Kendo. Itsuka looks at Ryuko with a surprised expression. What, you agree with her? Setsuna sighs and leans against a nearby wall. Look, Prez, I don't know who or what gave you those stupid ideas, but they're full of crap and you should know it. Itsuka's anger subsides and is replaced by confusion. What do you mean, girls? Setsuna smiles. Well, let's say you had a relationship with Greenie over there. I don't have feelings for him. Right, whatever. Let's say you did. Itsuka looks at Setsuna with some frustration. Yet she still feels curious as to where she's going with this. Setsuna's smile widens. If you were to be in a relationship with him, would things really change all that much? Itsuka raises an eyebrow. Huh, well yes, right. Ryuko smiles to Itsuka as well. Not really. Kendo, think about it. It would be better for you two. You two would continue to push each other in the right direction and you'd grow stronger together. Itsuka looks down to the floor in contemplation. The girls seem to raise a valid point. Would having a relationship with Izuku really be an obstacle to their hero careers? Not really. Things could stay the same between them. It would just be a bit more lovey. Itsuka sighs before looking away again. I don't know, girls, I'm still not sure that's how it would go. Setsuna groans and grabs Itsuka's shoulders, getting her attention fully. Listen, Prez, in case you had feelings for Midoriya. Theoretically, hypothetically, figuratively, whatever, in case you did, I don't think it would matter much. You're the best gosh darn organizer I know. If anyone would be able to separate personal time from studies and hero work, it's you. Not to mention how firm you'd be in case you had to put your foot down to set boundaries. Itsuka looked at her friend with a blank stare. She had spent so much time thinking about unimportant stuff that she hadn't really factored that in. She was Class B's big sister, after all. If she could look after her entire class and get them to stay in line, then she could surely do the same with one boy. Not to mention Izuku was the sweetest, kindest boy she had ever met, and he was just as determined to be a hero as she was, if not more. If there was someone who would understand and behave, it would be him, right? Itsuka finally outs Setsuna's hands away after a moment of contemplation and looks at her friends with a small frown. That still doesn't solve everything. Girls, I mean, Midoriya is a pretty confusing guy. Who knows who he really likes? He could already have a girlfriend for all we know. Setsuna laughs and Ryuko giggles. When Setsuna sees that Itsuka seems confused again, she decides to clear her confusion. Oh, come on, Prez. Really? Him? Itsuka blushes and looks away, crossing her arms again. Well, it's not impossible, all right. Setsuna rolls her eyes in frustration, deciding to put an end to this nonsense once and for all. Prez, I could babble on, but it seems like I'll have to be blunt if I want to get through to you. Itsuka raises an eyebrow. What? Setsuna looks at Ryuko. Ryuko, would you date Midoriya? Ryuko looks at Setsuna with a surprised expression accompanied by an intent blush. What? Setsuna, you don't just ask. Setsuna keeps staring at Ryuko intensely. So, would you? Ryuko looks away for some moments before looking at her friends with a small blush. Well, I don't know him very well, but I can tell he's someone determined, considerate, and not bad-looking, so I guess I would. Itsuka stares at Ryuko with a surprised expression, trying to ignore the sudden pang of annoyance and perhaps even anger she felt inside her. Setsuna smiles and turns back to Itsuka. See, Prez, Midoriya is quite the catch. I know lots of girls who'd take him any day of the week if they had their chance. What would you prefer, Kendo? Someone like Midoriya or say someone like Bakugo? Itsuka visibly shudders at the thought. Oh dear God, I'd want Midoriya. Setsuna giggles. That's the point I want to prove. If you had feelings for him, theoretically, hypothetically, figuratively, imaginatively, speculatively, whatever, in case you did, I'd imagine you'd want him to yourself, right? You can't risk losing him forever, Prez. If you don't tell him how you feel, he might be off the market before you know it. Heck, I might just ask him out myself. Setsuna chuckles, to which Itsuka's eye twitches. She did have a point, though, even if Izuku was a bit plain-looking. Itsuka couldn't deny that he was a really nice guy. And in this world of crazy villains, raging assholes like Bakugo, smug jerks like Monoma, wannabe meatheads and other sort of undesirable individuals, guys like Izuku were getting harder to find. Itsuka knew that quirk society was partly to blame for this, but it didn't alter the issue in any way. Hell, someone might already have her eyes set on Izuku unbeknownst to her. Itsuka thinks for a moment before letting out a sigh of resignation. Well, thanks for whatever this was, girls. I'll definitely think about it. This is all hypothetical anyways. Setsuna chuckles. Sure, hypothetical, I get it. Itsuka groans. I have to check up on Midoriya. I can't believe I left him there, see you later. Setsuna and Ryuko nod to Itsuka as she walks away. Once Itsuka is out of earshot, Ryuko whispers to Setsuna. She was serious, right? She's completely smitten, yeah. Itsuka walked back to the spot she left Izuku on, but she was surprised to not find him there. Damn it, either that took too long or someone else took him away, thought Itsuka to herself, scanning the mall to see if she could spot Izuku amongst the crowd of people passing by. Itsuka walks through the mall searching for Izuku, still thinking about her little chat with her friends. It felt rude to leave them just like that and cutting the conversation short the way she did. But she was starting to feel really uncomfortable. They raised a lot of valid points, and she had no way to rebuke them. It all made sense, and that's what made her feel really bad about herself. Setsuna and Ryuko had put everything in a pretty clear perspective, and it was one that Itsuka either didn't see because of her insecurities or she refused to acknowledge. Itsuka's train of thoughts was cut short before it could even begin, since she spotted Izuku sitting on a plaza with a hooded person beside him. Itsuka noticed that the hooded person had their arm wrapped around Izuku's shoulders, but Izuku looked rather tense. Itsuka approached the pair, and once she was close enough, she spoke in an uncertain tone. Izuku, is that a friend? Itsuka was horrified when Izuku lifted his gaze to look up at her. The hooded person had their hand on Izuku's neck and it looked like they were squeezing him. Izuku's gaze was terrified, and he was starting to tear up. Itsuka's blood ran cold when the hooded figure looked up at her, and she saw his pale skin, red eyes, dried-out skin, and sadistic smile. Itsuka knew that whoever this was, they were definitely not friendly. You let go of my friend, said Itsuka in a scared yet angry tone. Izuku looks up at Itsuka with an even more tense expression. This is nothing. Everything's fine. Don't come closer, Itsuka. Stay back. Izuku gasped when the figure released his hold on him, and he kneeled down to catch his breath. The figure smiled at Itsuka before getting up. Oh, I didn't know you came here with a friend. Sorry about that. Itsuka immediately rushed to Izuku's side to check on him. Izuku, are you okay? Izuku clutches his throat while looking at the figure with anger. You won't have your way to Mura Shigaraki. Itsuka freezes in place. She had heard that name before, on the news. That was the name of the villain in charge of the League of Villains and the responsible for the USJ attack. Itsuka looks at Shigaraki with surprise and concern in her features. Tamura Shigaraki. Shigaraki looks back at Izuku with a smile. Be careful, Izuku Midoriya. Next time we meet, I'll most likely have to kill you. Don't follow me or it'll be real unfortunate to these people. It had been about 30 minutes since the Shigaraki incident, and Itsuka had immediately called the police, who were currently on the hunt for the villain. Many of the students who were shopping for the items they needed had to stop altogether and evacuate the mall at once. So far, Shigaraki was nowhere to be found, and that's what was worrying everyone the most. Even though Itsuka knew the police had everything covered, she still decided to stay close to Izuku just in case something else happened. She was walking alongside him on their way to the train station, escorting him. Izuku looked thoughtful, while Itsuka looked a bit frustrated. Yet again, Izuku had managed to find himself at the center of something big. Itsuka really wanted to scold Izuku, but she knew that it wasn't his fault. Plus, it looked like he went through a whole set of emotions in the incident. He didn't need Itsuka scolding him on top of all that. Although, she was curious about this Tamura Shigaraki person and how he knew Izuku. Itsuka looked at Izuku, and she noticed his expression. One quick question wouldn't hurt, would it? Izuku. Izuku snapped back to reality and looked at Itsuka with a soft smile. Yes, Itsuka. So what was that back there? I mean, I know that guy was Tamura Shigaraki, the responsible for the attack on the USJ, but it seemed like he knew you. Izuku sighs, knowing that there was really no way to hide this. Well, yeah, he and I kinda bumped into each other at the USJ incident. Itsuka raises an eyebrow. Oh, did you? Well, what happened, if you don't mind me asking? Izuku rubs the back of his head. Well, he was a bit different back then. He was wearing hands over his arms, shoulders, and face at the USJ incident. And his quirk, he has a pretty scary quirk. Itsuka frowns. What's his quirk? Izuku looks at Itsuka with concern. I still don't know the exact details, but I think he disintegrates anything he manages to get his 5 fingers on. Itsuka's eyes widen in surprise and worry. What? Izuku, that's insane. And is that why he had his hand around your neck back there? Izuku sighs. Yes, I think he's mad at me specifically because I keep screwing up his plans. How so? I mean, he used a creature he called Namu to attack the USJ and hopefully kill All Might. And there were similar creatures to that one in Hasu when I fought the hero killer with Todoroki and Ida. My guess is that Shigaraki identifies me because I've messed with 2 of his plans already. Not to mention he could have been watching the sports festival. Itsuka looks at Izuku in contemplation. So do you think you'll see him again? Izuku looks at the ground. I don't know, I probably will, judging by what he said at the end. Itsuka decides to press the issue a little more. And did he tell you anything? You know, something that might give away what he wants to do. Izuku's expression darkens. He said he wanted to create a world without All Might just to prove how fragile society's sense of justice is. Itsuka's expression turns to a surprised one for a moment, before letting out a muffled chuckle. How well, that just tells me he has no hope in hell of achieving anything he wants to try. All Might is the freaking #1 hero. The symbol of peace. What could he and his group of lowlives hope to achieve against an unbeatable force like him? Izuku looks away in guilt. He knew that All Might wasn't as strong as before, and it was partially because of him. Izuku had inherited One for All, leaving All Might with mere remains of it. If All Might found himself on a particularly tough battle, it could result in him being rendered powerless. Izuku knew he had to train hard to become a hero as great as All Might if he didn't want society to break apart. But it felt like an extremely tough burden to bear, and he didn't feel like he controlled One for All at a decent level yet. The weight of the world had been placed on his shoulders, and he wasn't strong enough to carry it yet. Izuku merely gave Itsuka a slightly amused chuckle. Hey, you got that right. Itsuka looked at Izuku with a warm smile before wrapping her arm around his shoulders. But you shouldn't worry about that Shigaraki guy messing with you again, you hear me? If he tries anything, he'll have to get through me before hurting you. Izuku blushes slightly at Itsuka's gesture. Are you sure you want to do this, Itsuka? Shigaraki could be a dangerous threat. Itsuka giggles before ruffling Izuku's hair. Relax, you big lug. We're together in this, remember? I'm here, just like I said at the sports festival. We're a team. I trust you, Izuku. You can trust me too, you know. I can handle myself just fine. Izuku chuckles. You really like ruffling my hair, don't you? Itsuka giggles before letting go of Izuku. I just can't help it. Not when it's so soft and curly. Izuku blushes a little more. Thanks, Itsuka. The couple finally arrive at the train station. Itsuka smiles softly at Izuku. Well, I guess this is where we split up. Izuku sighs, already missing Itsuka. I guess it is. Itsuka gives Izuku a peck on the cheek before giving him a gentle push to the station. See you later, alligator. Izuku waves back at Itsuka. See you later, Itsuka. Itsuka turned around to walk home by herself, and when she did, she couldn't help but notice that a couple of girls her age had been staring at her, and upon noticing that they had been spotted by Itsuka, immediately retreated to an alleyway. Itsuka thought that the girls looked familiar for some reason. Old friends, perhaps, or maybe they had mistaken her for someone else. Itsuka shook off the thoughts of the unknown girls as she started her walk home. She thought about the conversation she had with Satsuna and Ryuko. She knew she was crushing on Izuku, and there was no denying it, since that would just be wasting everyone's time. Satsuna and Ryuko had pointed out pretty valid arguments. She hadn't thought about either that or she just refused to accept it. Romance had never been one of Itsuka's priorities, and she had never given much thought to it before. While other girls were gushing about pretty boys their age or the latest gossip at school, Itsuka was either not paying attention or simply not caring. She didn't really care about romance before because she never thought she would have a crush on a boy, and yet there was something about Izuku Midoriya that was different. Itsuka sighs as she walks off, wondering how she'd have to come clean eventually maybe. In an alley not too far away, a group of teens muttered to themselves in the dark of a dimly lit alleyway. Did you see her? Was it Itsu? Yup, definitely was. The silly little slut is still around town. Great. Things will go smoothly from here if that's the case. I, for one, still feel uncomfortable doing this. Oh, get over yourself, you big crybaby. Yeah, we've come pretty far, and we can't back down now. Once everything falls into place, our Itsuka will come home.